Bună ziua! Aparatul funcționează. Merge. Vă invităm să luați loc. Dear guests, dear friends, dragi prieteni, autorități, thank you all for coming and joining us here today. Today marks our new Bucharest Forum edition, and we are very proud to be able to host it today here with all of you. I would like to express my gratitude to all of you who so generously contributed this event to materialize. And I'm referring to authorities, partners, volunteers, the teams of Aspen or GMF. We all chosen to be part of this great public event because of our mutual passion for a good society and value-based leadership. Ladies and gentlemen, Bucharest Forum is an annual high-level event organized by Aspen Institute Romania and German Marshall Fund of the US Bucharest office. Since its inception in 2012, the mission of the Bucharest Forum is to create a regional platform for forward thinking on economic and security policies and for promoting political dialogue between governments and society. The mission of Bucharest Forum is to raise questions about society and economic opportunities, prompting on a new way of thinking related main, hot and current areas, themes of today. We will have one full day, half day today and one full day tomorrow, and we will discuss several subjects. From these, I will point only a few that I consider that are very important for all of us. After 30 years of the transition of this part of the Europe, we are in a stage to think about our society, about the economic of these countries, about where we are and what is next. Another subject is related Middle East, and we have a very actual question related Middle East, related a solution, if exists, and if it's somebody that is looking for a solution. There are subjects that will be addressed during the forum, like trade wars, conflicts, and global governance. Energy. Just we finished our Aspen Energy Forum in Ploiești today, discussing about conventional and sustainability in energy. And very important as well, transatlantic security, geopolitics for the greater Black Sea area. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you again for the fact that you are here, and I really believe that the best way to influence our future is to be active, to participate in the society, and in this way to have the chances to influence our future. Thank you, and I will invite now Alina. Alina is the head of Bucharest office, German Marshall Fund in Romania, that will address more details about our demand.
Thank you, Ciprian. My name is Alina Inai. I run the Bucharest office of the German Marshall Fund of the United States, and this is, I believe, my 6th edition of the Bucharest Forum. And I do have to note that this is the first edition without Mircea Joană. So it's going to be very, very difficult to do the introduction in the way Mircea would have done it if he was here. I'll do my best, but please, please, no comparison. As I said, it is the 7th edition of the Bucharest Forum, and every year Mircea and I, and in the future Ciprian and I, or everybody else and I, we're coming together, we're taking stock at the current environment, geopolitical, economic, social, and we're going like, oh my God, what's going on in this world? It's crazy. How do we put all of this together? But you know what? Let's do it this time because next year is gonna be better. Guess what? This is next year, it's not better. We took stock, again, of the environment, geopolitical, economic, social, and it's much worse. It's much worse than last year. It's much worse than it's been in the 7 years that the Bucharest Forum was running. And we have very, very little optimism for the next year. But we'll cross that bridge when you get there. What we are trying to do in this year's agenda was to take these 3 threads, geopolitical, economic, and social, and try to put them together in something that makes sense. And unfortunately, this something is disruption and volatility. Initially, we only looked at volatility and we said everything is confusing, the entire environment is confusing, everything is volatile, but then things got worse and we added disruption because there is disruption when you look in the security realm, when you look at what happens with the global economy, and when you look at what happens within the societies. Within the security, we do look at what's going on, what's happening in the Middle East with very much concern. We look at what's happening with Turkey and to a certain extent in Turkey. We also look at what's happening with the European defense. We look at what's happening with France, what's happening with Germany. And again, we try to bring all of this together into the discussion. Last but not least, of course, we do look at Ukraine and Moldova with serious concern. We took the global economy, and what we try to bring in this year's agenda is the threat that the advancement of technology is bringing to the business climate, to the manner, the way in which business has been made so far, and to the future of business, but also to the disruption in the workforce and to the fear that this is bringing along. And of course, last but not least, we'll be talking about the threat of a new global crisis, which we've heard about in the last 4 years, but it looks like this time is serious and next year is gonna hit us, or so they say. And this is a big addition from the Bucharest Forum so far. We look at the social disruptions. We look at what illiberalism is bringing, may bring, has brought already to the societies in the transatlantic sphere, and we also look at what the polarization is creating within societies and all the vulnerabilities and threats that it brings with it. As I said, we look at this context with concern, with fear of further disruption, with very little optimism, but then we decided, now wait a second, it's time for a silver lining. We cannot only look at the bad things happening, we cannot only look at the threats, we have to look at something positive, or try to bring something positive into all this chaos. So we looked at Eastern Europe, Central and Eastern Europe. We looked at the 30 years of moderate success of the countries in Central and Eastern Europe, and we decided this is going to be the silver lining of this year's Bucharest Forum agenda. We'll be looking at emerging Europe, at a possible new economic model. Of course, we'll be looking with criticism at everything that's going on with the politics and with the social aspects of it, but also look at the successes, as I said, at the progress that this part of the world has had in the last 30 years. And this is, as I said, the silver lining through the entire context of volatility and disruption. This is the gist, if you want, of this year's Bucharest Forum, and we have a wonderful, wonderful lineup of speakers and moderators and people to help us set the scene. And the first one to be doing so, if he is here, would be, if he is here, is Mr. Doru Frunzulică, who is Secretary of State with the Ministry of Defense, and I should have started by thanking the Ministry of Defense for helping us in getting this wonderful building and this wonderful room that everybody has admired. Thank you very much. Looking forward to the discussions, and I do invite Mr. Doru Frunzulică to the stage.
Thank you very much. It's a real pleasure to be today for the Bucharest Forum, which already it's a famous format organized in Romania. In fact, I'm coming from the National Bank of Romania, where we hold yesterday and today the Southeast Europe Ministerial Forum, another important regional format of cooperation among the ministries of defense from 16 countries in the area. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, in fact, as I told you, I'm very honored to participate in the 8th session of the Bucharest Forum, approaching a substantial and challenging topic, the Black Sea area, from a holistic perspective to include both the security concerns and the cooperation opportunities. First of all, I would like to extend my appreciation to the organizers of this event. Of course, one of them is the German Marshall Fund of the United States of America, and in cooperation with other institutions, Aspen, first of all. But I would like to extend, our thanks to Mr. Mircea Joană, the president of Aspen Institute Romania, the new NATO Deputy Secretary General that is going to take over its position, as I know, tomorrow, for their initiative to invite important stakeholders in defense, economy, energy, business and global governance, who will try to identify a positive outcome from the current volatility and disruption in the Black Sea region. Allow me to start by reviewing the main developments in the security environment in the Black Sea region and the Allied and EU responses in these developments. The wider Black Sea area traditionally represents an area of confrontation between the geopolitical interests of the West and those of the Russian Federation, whose annexation of Crimea and involvement in the Donbas separatist crisis represents the strongest degradation of the European order system with international impact since the end of the Cold War. The Black Sea region is of major significance for the European security, as it is a major crossroads and a critical intersection of the East-West and South-North corridors. The most important influence on the security of the Black Sea is generated by Russia's assertive approach and aggressive behavior in relation with its neighbors. The illegal annexation of Crimea by the Russian Federation and its meddling in the conflict in eastern Ukraine, along with the build-up of an aggressive military posture, had a fundamental impact on the Black Sea region security, with significant implications for both Euro-Atlantic security and regional allies and partners. Romania has an important role in the stability and security of the Black Sea region, which is an essential prerequisite for a lasting and sustainable development of the states in the region. Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, I think you agree with me that the most serious threats to the European rules-based security architecture have occurred in the Black Sea region. Russia's conflict with Georgia in 2008, the illegal annexation of Crimea in 2014, the destabilizing activities in eastern Ukraine, and militarization of the Black Sea. And we don't have to forget about, you know, the so-called frozen conflicts around the Black Sea, from Transnistria, very close to our border in the Republic of Moldova, to eastern Ukraine, to South Ossetia, to Abkhazia, to Nagorno-Karabakh. It is widely accepted that the negative security evolutions recorded since 2014 have changed significantly the security environment of the whole European continent, with the heavy impact falling mainly on the whole eastern flank of the alliance, from the high north and Baltic Sea to the Black Sea area. In the Black Sea region, Russia is tailoring its hybrid warfare capabilities to best exploit the specific vulnerabilities of each targeted state. We are all familiar with the Russian ethnic population protection story in the eastern Ukraine, the active propaganda campaign which aims to create new or reignite old historic issues, reducing the cooperation in the region and undermining trust in Euro-Atlantic institutions, including both NATO and the EU, the spread of fake news and conspiracy theories, and direct support for political parties and non-governmental organizations with anti-NATO and anti-European agenda, in fact, to increase Euroscepticism. A specific aspect to the Black Sea is the Russian military buildup and the deployment of A2AD posture missiles. Russia also exploits the frozen conflicts in the region for political control of the former Soviet Union states. The unrecognized secessionist regions are fueling the organized crime, arms and people smuggling, promote radicalization, and have the potential to destabilize the whole region. The European security cannot be approached separately from that of the Black Sea. Hence, we consider it is particularly important to increase Allied presence and posture in the region. It is our belief that the enlargement of NATO and EU and the endorsement of their policies of peace, stabilization, and development have triggered a comprehensive project of modernization in the region. In this context, we support the implementation of NATO and EU policies and actions that contribute to the development and modernization of our region. Romania is also fully committed to working in close cooperation with its partners to support peaceful solutions to all challenges we are facing nowadays in the spirit of prevailing diplomacy, respect for international norms and regulations, promotion of basis principles such as sovereignty of states, territorial integrity, peace and stability, and of course, development if possible. The Romanian government gives priority to defense, and the key dimension of its activity is the implementation of a coherent defensive policy. In this vein, I would like to underline our determination to continue fulfilling Romania's commitment to meet the 2% and 20% guidelines of the defense investment pledge adopted by NATO heads of state and government at the Wales Summit, as included in the 2015 National Agreement and 2018-2020 government program. We put a premium in the full implementation of the decision adopted at the most recent NATO summit, the implementation of the EU Global Strategy on Security and Defense, as well as on the strengthening of our strategic partnership with the United States of America. we feel that it is our responsibility to contribute to the stability and security of the Black Sea region, which is an essential prerequisite for a long-lasting development of the states in the region through cooperation and self-inclusiveness. At NATO level, Romania is an active contributor to the adaptation process of the alliance. We do our share in strengthening the deterrence and defense posture of the alliance by implementing 7 measures in land, maritime, and air domains under the tailored forward presence umbrella. In that context, we bear the burden for the operationalization of the multinational structures established in our territory. Multinational Brigade in Craiova, in Southwest, and Multinational Division Southeast headquarters, and soon to be established a Multinational Corps level Southeast headquarters, which will complete the NATO C2 architecture in our region. It will contribute to the operational coherence and effectiveness for the Allied forward presence in the region. We very much welcomed the approval of the Washington package of measures for the security in the Black Sea last April. The implementation of the agreed measures should be a priority at Allied level. The package will improve Allied situational awareness in the region, for which we are going to work closely also with our regional partners, Georgia and Ukraine. Moreover, we should also devote increased efforts to our cooperation with Republic of Moldova, where Romania has tremendous interest, as you all know. In line with Allied policy on enhancing stability and engaging with partners, NATO is lending political support to its partners, as well as helping them build sound defense institutions that generate the capacity to protect their national sovereignty. So we, as Eastern allies and partners who have similar perceptions on Russian hybrid tactics and threats, which lie on the edge of traditional warfare but still outside of the defense domain, should increase our cooperation in developing our institutional and societal resilience. At EU level, the progress achieved in the implementation of the EU Global Strategy on Security and Defense in full coordination and complementarity with NATO is highly important for us. Romania approached this aspect very thoroughly during its presidency of the EU Council in the first semester of this year. The EU has a unique ability in bringing together multiple strands of work, fostering comprehensive approaches, and combining in an efficient way civil and military instruments. It is best equipped to offer a valid perspective for a peaceful, democratic, stable, and prosperous future for the countries in the Black Sea region. But in order to do that, we need to achieve a more coordinated approach of the EU towards this area. There is no doubt that the Black Sea region is of strategic importance for the EU. The work done over the last 2.5 years to consolidate EU profile on security and defense provides the basis to step up Union approach towards this region. EU can bring a tremendous added value to different processes under development, including in the area of security and defense. The new cooperative approaches promoted at EU level, initiatives such as PESCO, card or European Defense Fund could lead eventually to a better response of the Union to threats and challenges manifesting in the Black Sea area. EU action should not be seen as a duplication of other organizations present in the region, but it needs to be coherent and coordinated. We are looking forward to making further progress in raising the profile of the Black Sea area on the European agenda, and we should start with developing a European strategic vision for this area. Following the adoption of the common NATO-EU declaration at the Warsaw Summit, the cooperation of the two organizations has significantly improved with visible results. So, both organizations could work together to promote the development of the Black Sea region and address its security challenges. Ladies and gentlemen, this overview of the security situation in the Black Sea region and the political military approach in dealing with the security challenges in this area is only one aspect of the full spectrum of the West-East multilateral relationship. I look forward to hearing views on other interesting aspects of this spectrum, respectively economic, energetic, academic, cultural aspects. I do believe that Romania's status as a NATO and EU member state, as well as a Black Sea riparian state, entitles us to act as a bridge between East and West, North and South, by promoting the Western values to the East while familiarizing the West with the Eastern peculiarities. All we have to do is to identify a common language based on the rule of law, democracy, human and citizen rights, market economy, while seeking the security and well-being of our citizens. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Frunzulică. I did mention earlier that we have wonderful moderators whom we invited to help us get the conversations going. The first moderator who's going to lead the first panel, Alexandra Martin, who is the director of the GloBSEC Forum.
Strategic Forums.
Strategic Forums, so not only one, but the Strategic Forums. Alexandra, please come to the stage and introduce your panel to the audience.
Sure, thank you, Alina. Thank you for the introduction, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alex Martin. As mentioned, I'm a director at GloBSEC, and I'm very glad to join Bucharest Forum this year, also because I am a Romanian. And I'm also very happy that GloBSEC has been invited to be a strategic partner this year. It is increasingly important to work together as European think tanks to ensure that we forge new cooperation and we think of what challenges are today on the table and what awaits for us tomorrow. This opening panel aims to tackle a range of issues, 30 years since the fall of the Iron Curtain, and we need to touch the past and the present to be able to have a proper view of the future. In 1989, I was an infant on the other side of the country, in Timișoara, and I had no idea whatsoever what 1989 will mean for the region and for my own country. But what I know is that my generation has the privilege to live in a country that is free and at peace, on a continent that is free and at peace, and too often we forget about that. Fast forward 30 years, though, would be impossible to dismiss what's happening around us, and Alina already made a good list of all the challenges, the same for the State Secretary when it comes to the Black Sea. But we do have a Western order that is in crisis, a globalization that brought benefits but also soared the level of inequalities. The great power competition is back. Our liberal democratic system seems not to fit the rapid advancement of technology. Climate change is threatening our life on the planet. UK is about to exit the European Union, and the transatlantic relationship is not as easy as it used to be. Against this backdrop, CEE countries still try to find their path, both individually or together. We won't try to find solutions to all these issues today, but hopefully we'll be able to at least bring some new perspectives, some fresh ideas, together with my fellow panelists. Dan Niculescu, State Secretary at the Romanian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Matthew Boyce, Deputy Assistant Secretary for European and Eurasian Affairs at the US State Department, and Rastislav Kačer, Chairman of GlobSec, my boss and a fine Slovak career diplomat. Gentlemen, please join me on stage. The mics are already open. A housekeeping note, we are about to run for 60 minutes. Halfway through, we'll open the floor for question and answers. Please raise your hand. We'll have mic runners around. State your name and also your affiliation, and keep your remarks or questions short and sweet. With that, I look forward to pick up your brains. We'll start with Dan, and then with Matt, and with Rastislav for this first question. And just to frame the conversation, where do we stand today, 30 years after? What did we achieve? What did we fail to achieve? And how did we meet the expectations of the people throughout the process?
Thank you, Alexander. Very interesting question. I'm not a judge to tell you about the expectations. I don't know whose expectations we're talking at this stage. But you mentioned at the beginning that you were 1 year old in 1989. I was 14 years old. So, and I was in Târgoviște, where the end of the regime took place. So basically, there are some similarities here. I am confident that after 30 years, Romania is definitely doing a lot better. And I'm telling you from the perspective of the democracy in the country, the peace, the stability to a certain extent, but also the things that we have achieved through our integration into NATO and the EU. We are just at the end of a successful presidency, I would say. We are not only members of NATO, but we are proactively work in NATO with allies to promote initiatives, to be basically and respond to the allied needs, while we also consolidate our security in a turmoiled region, and we can talk about it later. So, from our perspective, as a 14-year-old boy who was standing in queue to take the bread on the card, I would say we do pretty well today. But of course, this is my vision. Maybe I'm wrong. Yes, there is always room for improvement, that's for sure. And this is what we have to work towards. But looking around us and seriously to our vibrant democracy today, I would say we're doing pretty good. And I'm optimistic for the future.
I can say it. Matt.
Thank you very much, Alex, for the also to GMF and to Aspen for the invitation to be here today. I like what you've done here with this 30-year anniversary kind of concept, because these anniversaries are times to step back and to think about where we've been and where we've come from, and how much what we've achieved, what we haven't achieved. There are times to remember, in this particular case, the hundreds of thousands of people in Central Europe who opposed communism in one way or another. I mean, millions, really. Differing numbers in differing ways in different countries, but the opposition, I've had the privilege of meeting many dissidents in my life, people who've been arrested, dozens of times, spent much time in communist jails, tortured, who've sacrificed enormously for freedom that people who live in this part of Europe are now able to enjoy. It's an incredibly inspiring story to have. I wasn't living here, but to have watched from a distance from Radio Free Europe, where I spent some time, and to also, because this is also, in fact, for me, a rather deeply personal issue as well, because my mother also was a refugee from communism, and so sort of watching her reaction after East Germany, after the wall fell in Germany, because she was from Dresden. This is just and watching how her family was split and how what happened to the one part of her family that stayed, and then of course her who had the good sense to leave. So this is an opportunity to think about these things and to to also remind to pay honor to those who participated in the changes, who opposed, who also helped to transform these countries, the countries of Central Europe, into what they are today. So also, I would also put in a tiny plug for the role that the United States played. We think we helped a little bit, and we would sometimes, and we kind of look back with a certain amount of satisfaction at what we helped to bring about. So there's a little bit of that going on too, but it's just very. We're dealing right now also with different debates, competing narratives about what actually happened at that time. I mean, we've seen it in this year of anniversaries, when the Kremlin was trying to redefine what happened with the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact in Poland, for example. Or we had the case just the other day, well, a couple weeks ago now, actually, where there was a dueling narratives in Bulgaria, where on the 75th anniversary of the, quote, liberation of Bulgaria, the Russian narrative was all about liberation. And while there is an element of truth to that, of course, the Red Army came in, and then the government of Bulgaria was replaced. The Bulgarian Foreign Ministry reminded the public and that with the liberation also came decades of darkness, decades of economic deprivation, of political repression, of all this sort of thing. And it's always these kind of, it offers us a time to think about this and to discuss it and to remember what really did happen. So that in itself is really, I think, very valuable, especially as in many of our societies, the memories are getting blurry. People are forgetting what really happened. Some people weren't even born, and they see the remnants of communism around them in terms of the buildings that look different from the way they do in other parts of the world, that where there's or even the legacies of communism are not present, but they have an opportunity to remind, the societies have an opportunity to remind themselves about how far they have come. And I really do share your view, although I must say, Aline, I think you used the term a modest success. If I caught that correctly, I would actually raise you a bit. I wouldn't. Of course, this is Romania. Romanians will decide whether this is a modest success or not. But from the outside, this looks like much more than a modest success. I don't know what you can sort of think of the various gradations. Was it a spectacular success? Well, some people might take an issue with that because there are lots of things that are still not right here, and so maybe people will say, well, no, it can't be spectacular. It's whatever the word is. I would perhaps give yourself a little bit more credit than that, whatever. And of course, we all know the challenges that in this case Romania is facing, but of course the other countries of Central Europe are all facing rather significant challenges in many ways. But this is something that really is more than just modest. We have just, in fact, yesterday we saw the Pew Foundation came out with another one of these surveys, pegged to the 30th anniversary of the fall of the Iron Curtain. And a lot of the indicators that they're measuring public opinion in a lot of different countries, and of course the results will vary from country to country and from category to category, but the successes in terms of economic opportunity, of education, of political freedoms, of support for the EU and NATO. These are all rather significant. They of course vary from country to country, and in some there are places they're very strong, other places they're a little bit less strong. But the results that particular survey indicated were really quite significant. And so, and of course, GlobeSec does these surveys as well. Rostio can talk about that if he wishes. But and of course, some of the other foundations and institutes have taken similar assessments of sort of where the strengths are and where the weaknesses are in post-communist Central Europe. But the results really are very impressive. And of course, and so we just have to remember that and remind our societies, I think, sometimes that whatever difficulties there are, in present time, there are you've come so far. And when I think about that, the time I spent sort of traveling around what was then the Soviet bloc, Warsaw Pact countries in the 1980s. And how different it looks and how different it feels, and it's just it's spectacular.
I appreciate the optimism of both you and Dan, and maybe Rostio can help me on bringing also the unfinished business of Central and Eastern Europe, because it's not just the pure research, it's also the Freedom House degrading one of Romania's neighbor last year from free and fair to partially free country when it comes to elections. And I'm not going to name it because probably all of you know, but the recent elections, local elections, actually bring some hope. Rostio, from your perspective, from more Central Europe, what are the achievements, but also what did we not achieve at the end of the day?
You're fishing for some of my paranoia and skepticism. All right, I can try my best.
I know you will by now.
But first of all, let me congratulate Alina and Ciprian, to both of you, and thank you for inviting us and making us partner on this. It looks very impressive. Congratulations. On what we achieved, I was 24. I was probably the oldest of the crew here in Velvet Revolution in Czechoslovakia. And I still recall my debate with my pa, who's already dead, in the summer barbecue party after my graduation, when we got to debate, and he was very skeptical about any possibility of change over communism and this whole Soviet Empire system. And I was very optimistic, and I was telling him, that this is going to finish. And you see, this is going to collapse like a house of cards, because it is so crazy concept. And I saw tears in his eyes, and he said, well, I thought so, for all of my life. When I'm getting old, and this is not going to change, and you underestimate how strong the regime can be. Well, 3 months of our conversation, it collapsed like a house of cards, and here we are. Overall, let me say some good news and some bad news. On good news side, whatever we will take as a measurement or as a benchmark, this is a success story. These 30 years is a success story. No question asked to me. Who is not willing to accept it is in the category of which was mentioned by State Secretary of hybrid thinking, where your emotions and your impressions are more important to you as the facts and measurable things. And strangely, well, I'll put it in the second category of bad news, more and more people are more confused and more rely on their impressions and their emotions rather than the facts and realities. I was fortunate to travel around Romania as a guest here in the country. Let me tell you that I'm impressed also being here in Romania. I was in my late teenage, early 20s, so this was in the mid-80s. Here hiking for a couple of times. I managed to walk through Transylvanian mountains, sleep in my tent, drink that bloody stuff which shepherds drink with the dark bread, and visiting number of towns. Romania changed light years since that time, I can tell you. And whether you would look at the GDP of whole region, of whole post-communist world, or AIC index, or quality life of the quality index, you don't need to do a very sophisticated emotional research. Whole region changed substantially. I have to, since this is both it's the American European think tanks, and we have this strong transatlantic touch here, say that there was a very important involvement of the United States in all this process of making Europe free, more united. There was huge skepticism in the early 90s about the EU enlargement, and this was Clinton administration's strong push, and then continued by the first Bush administration, actually for combining or linking NATO and EU enlargement, and there was strong push for that. And I was 2 weeks ago in Moscow on a trilateral dialogue, United States, Europe, and Russia. And overall notion, even from the American ground, I know what on the earth is happening out there, Matt, because there was Charles Kupchan saying, oh, we shouldn't have enlarged, we should have found a different scheme for this post-communist world. And Russians saying, oh, you pushed here in this, NATO pushed here. And it raised me from my chair because nobody pushed. We asked, and this was free choice of us living in Central Europe, making and choosing our own friends and choosing the alliance. And I spent 14 years of my bloody life trying to persuade the other guys on the other side of NATO to enlarge in the EU. So there was no push. And I want to finish here on that note that it could have been a different format or different satisfaction formula. We can look at that, how it happened in Ukraine, that formula, or how it worked in Balkans, which where Europe didn't enlarge. And I'm not saying it should have enlarged, but it's visible when you go to Bosnia and Herzegovina, across the border to Hungary. What is the difference? Or Slovakia, or Poland, Eastern Poland, and Ukraine, etc., etc. The bad news is that the world changed in 30 years. And I think this will be the agenda for the conference, to look how it changed and what are the challenges we are facing as the Western community of free and democratic nations, whether the old correlations that if you are democratic, free, with free economy, this gives you a comparative edge, an advantage, which was the case for decades, whether that is still relevant, etc., and how to deal with this spread of brain eater, which is happening in all free world, which is changing through social networks and through alternative media. It's kind of resetting our operating system in our brains and emotions again, and bullshit, it's more important to you than the reality.
We'll talk about disruption and how social media and actually digital innovation and digital revolution is changing the way our political system works and if we are fit or not. But I want to pick up on one thing that you said about enlargement and about what happened since 1989 was the widening of the West as we know it through various stages. And my question, which is more of a bird eye, is the West still a geopolitical actor in itself? Has it been before? Do we talk about the West in every aspect, geopolitical, economical, as one consolidated actor? Or we talk about multiple Wests?
Okay.
Any one of you?
May
I will start with
Taylor.
Taylor.
I say it's still a relevant actor. I think it's even growing its importance. You see, when we discussed about NATO enlargement, and I want also to pick up what our colleague said, and I think it's important to put emphasis, it was our own free will. It was with the support of the US, but that support landed on an open heart. So basically it was the quest to rejoin the European and Euro-Atlantic family. This is how at least I perceived it at that stage, being a kid and even now. So it's not only about security and economics, but it's also about principles and it's about democracy. And I think this is the strongest bond that we have with the West. And this is what, at the end of the day, when everything crumbles, it will still be there. So it's not an interest, a geopolitical interest, like some say, or something. It's more than that. It's also a feeling that you belong to that big family of civilized nations with common values and with the high standards in democracy. Yes, we can improve in that. I know for sure, but I'm not here to comment on that. However, I'm convinced that this phrase or this word, the West, represents extremely something extremely important from my perspective for Romania. So I do believe the West, as you call it, is still relevant still attracts, and still can, let's say, continue to have relevance as a global player.
You want to pick on that, Matt?
I totally agree that it does and it should continue, but I also think that the West as a political, geopolitical, and cultural construct is under stress, is under, and some people even say under attack, by competing models of how to organize society. We have a West which goes back, centuries, what a millennia really, that goes into the sort of back to Judeo-Christian thought through the Enlightenment and into the 21st century. And this is a body of it's a culture from which the world has benefited enormously. And we are ourselves, but it's also something that's we being democracies and being thoughtful people. We find that it's of course not a perfect construct. It's got weaknesses. Democracy has its weaknesses. Capitalism has its weaknesses, and so people are discussing this with great energy and poking holes in it, and then we have also external actors who from Asia that are setting up an entirely different way of organizing society. Based on, say, one-party state, authoritarian dictatorships, or state-directed societies. 1984, Big Brother is watching you sort of societies. These are very different from what we have we've achieved over time. And I'm not even mentioning the Russia phenomenon, which is the Kremlin and it's sort of its attempt to undermine the West through our institutions, through our societies. I don't need to. I mean, Doru mentioned it in some of his remarks just a bit ago. These are these efforts to undermine the concept of this profoundly successful way of organizing society, and that has led to so much freedom and so much prosperity for so many people over so many centuries. We shouldn't take it for granted. We cannot take it for granted because this is because there are other ways of organizing society, and they are competing, and they are also competing in Europe, or competing even in the United States. And we are in the middle of this process. So, I think many people in this room would probably agree that the West as a concept is a pretty attractive one, but it's something that we shouldn't take for granted, and we need to work on all the time, because there are other models of organizing society which are competing for our attention and offering some things which are some people even in our societies consider appealing. So
what I hear is that the West is still strong. However, we have multiple narratives competing for our societies. We also have foreign external forces that try to undermine our way of living. In particular, you mentioned Russian Federation. So, Rusty, you're coming from the region and you've been on both sides of the Atlantic. What is the CE role in the current engagement or relationship between the West and Russia in the absence of any type of formal cooperation, in the absence of any type of arms control treaty currently in place, against the backdrop of Ukraine crisis, Syria, and so on and so forth? Is there something that can come from CE in this regard?
That's a very good question, and it could be a whole panel on this, actually. Because the West, we need to little step back and think, what is the concept of the West? And this was, and Matt is saying, based on the Judeo-Christian values. That's the first thing. But not only that, it's been going through humanism, French Revolution, democracy, industrial revolution, capitalism, competitive free trade economy. And, in the current notion of the West, when we will look at that, it's first of all combination of freedom, of the liberal society in terms of the democratic values, in combination with free trade economy, which in the last decades, or say in the last 150 years, proven to be the most successful and the most competitive model in the world. Culturally, it's strange because Russia, it's a kind of semi-rooted in the concept of the Old West. It's a Christian, though not the Western Christianity, because, as you would say, west of Ukraine, we opted for the West when Saint Stephen married Giselle of Bavaria, and we opted instead of Constantinople for Rome. And then the West began in the region. Russia never made it. Russia was also not part of the humanism movement and French Revolution to a degree, and was never free society in the right sense. But culturally, when we come to Christian Judeo root and some other sense, it is. And it's confusing, still it's confusing. Because when I was in Moscow and was trying to explain Sergei Prihodko in the early 90s when we were joining NATO, that why we want to join, and this is not against Russia, he said, well, no, it is, you don't understand. And I was explaining more and more, and he said, well, I'm telling you, you don't understand Russian soul. You join NATO, you are our enemy, full stop. And I said, well, like, look, you know, this is weird, because this is not this was not a war of United States or Americans and Russians in the Cold War. This was a war of free and authoritarian. So if you are free society, you should be part of the victory of the Cold War and be part of the concept. Why wouldn't you be more open for this cooperation? And he looked at me like I'm crazy. And he said, well, you will never understand Russian soul. And here we come, because when you see Mr. President Bush, or even looking in his eyes or in his soul, and President Obama resetting something which is very hard to reset, because these are the planes which will never intersect. We are probably looking in a different concept. And here I want to make one important point, and I'll finish with that. World is not driven, or overall evolution of species in a very Darwinistic terms applies to human society as such. Democracy and free trade was not ever the concept for the last 4,000 years. Nation state was not a concept over the last 4,000 years. There were many concepts how humanity evolved, and there are very many competitive models. One competitive model doesn't assure you ever that it will remain competitive. The world is changing, and the world is changing faster than ever, and it's technologically driven, social media driven. There are a zillion factors which are changing the world at the speed which is extremely high. Here we see United States pulling off, but still, even if you behave completely irrational, a little safe, because you are big, you're strong militarily, and you get quite competitive economy. Then we see Russia, which is not pulling anything more, but more destruction, and it's trying to erode Europe and transatlantic unity, which was always the goal, and now finally successful. It's not making them stronger, it's only making Europe weaker. So on the scales of comparative, this is like you see sometimes people who feel miserable in the life, and they bring miserability in the life of others. So it gives you good feeling that I'm not the only one who is miserable here in the world. But true competition comes from China, which is silently, going like eating Parma ham. If you grab it and try to chew on it, well, good luck. But if you slice it by thin slices, you're suddenly on the bone. And they are doing it. So whether we will remain competitive as the West, this is a big question to me, with United States pulling off, Donald Trump forgetting about the values and being very transactional, Europe eroding by all our own mistake. We are shooting both of our legs, and then we are crying that we cannot walk properly. Russia being destructive, and China just waiting when the fruits will become lower to pick them.
I'll get back to China, but I want to hear Dan's view on Russia and what is the region's role.
Thank you very much. Yeah, well, I'm participating in different debates for over the last 2 years, and the world seems a dark place, really, and it's going even darker. And this is what I keep hearing from people much smarter than me. And from my perspective, if I look at the present between Europe and Russia and Western Russia, is a profound lack of trust, which is building on, and which already, attained maximum level at this stage. From our perspective here in Romania, I'm talking from my expertise, is the profound incapability, lack of capability to predict what Russia is going to do next. And usually, what Russia is going to do next is aggressive conduct, in cycles. And this is what, at least here, built a lot of anxiety. That's one. So it's a profound lack of trust. Of course, I can go in history and I can agree with you what you have said, but I'm now looking at the stage right now. You said there is no arms conventional regimes anymore in place. We can look why, and we can understand why. So basically, it's not who started. We can enter this game of who started first. But in my view, it's this lack of trust that is going on and it continues. And on this basis, I am not interested, and I'm not even contemplating more than dialogue at this stage until I'm aware that I'm talking to an equal partner that understands the principles of international law, that has some predictability in the foreign policy, and that does not use force as the final method to settle conflicts. Until that stage, I am on the fence. And I will continue to be on the fence. I will continue to consolidate whatever security I have. Some say it's not enough. Some say we need more. Yeah, we can talk about it. But I'm going to do my utmost best to ensure that Romania and its citizens are best protected from that kind of behavior. Will I be successful? I mean, not myself. I mean, Romania in itself. We hope so. And in the meantime, we have to analyze, and talking about the Russian soul, and to make also our counterparts in Russia understand the reason of our conduct. We've been asked in different stages of our dialogue, why is it so aggressive, your conduct? And we've been asked, because we don't trust you. It's simple as that. I don't know what you have in mind. I know my history very well, and if I look in the pages of the history, everything that we had ended up bad for us. It's very simple. So that's why I'm here on the fence. So at this stage, the profoundness of this lack of trust is so relevant, then I myself, I'm overwhelmed by, I don't find any solution at this stage. And I'm not even trying to look at a solution, I'm trying to consolidate what I have. As also not only security, but also in terms of democracy, knowing what model Russia is, promoting.
But it's very different if you're sitting in Bucharest or if you're in Warsaw or anywhere Central Eastern Europe, and it's very different if you're in Paris, and if we look like President Macron, new approach or at least new strategy, or if you're even sitting in Washington, D.C., because proximity at the end of the day is a matter in this region, in the geopolitical interaction. So how do you work with the counterparts from Western Europe, at least?
It is my duty and my honor to explain and promote this assessment. And in an alliance and in the EU, that really matters. And you can say whatever you want on NATO and EU. But there are forums and dialogue, which is very serious. And we, Romania, can, and with our Polish, Slovak, other colleagues from the East, can share this assessment in order to ponder the approach. Mm-hmm. This is what it's all about. I can bring in the alliance and in the EU my knowledge of the region. And I'm heard. Well, maybe not all the time, maybe not the highest levels, maybe not 24 hours a day, but I can still have my way of doing this in the dialogue with our Europeans and also with the US colleagues.
That's a very strong perspective, and I hope that this will be heard also on the other side, at least, of the continent. I'll go back to China, to you, Rastio, and then we'll move to trade wars because it's a topic of the day to Matt. But when it comes to Belt and Road Initiative, 17 countries in Europe are part of. What makes ERI attractive to Central and Eastern Europe, and how is that compatible with EU rules, procedures, and conditionality?
Well, you maybe ask the wrong person. Luckily, I don't work for government anymore. I worked for 21 years, but I'm not very enthusiastic. I think it's a bubble, all of that concept of even that format of 19+1 or this Belt and Road. I think there is a more talk in that. than the reality is. I see it more of a clever PR than a true viable concept. And when I would look in the region where there was a strong Chinese involvement in an infrastructural project like this Belgrade or, you know, Serbia, Hungary railroad, it was not going extremely well, etc., etc. And I don't want to say anything negative about China in economic terms, because China, it's a very good partner for cooperation, but the approach sometimes is, you know, kind of pick and choose. First of all, in our region, in particular in Central region, there is sometimes misunderstanding. When I follow some of the Hungarian or Czech enthusiasm about China, even I heard Viktor Orban saying, if Europe will erode or collapse, we will have China as a supplement or as an alternative for economic cooperation, or Central Asia plus China. Well, it's a little weird. It's a little hard to compare, because our business is 90%. It's done within the European or OECD context. It's a big mass. But also, it is not that, like, from EU funds, money come to your country to develop. From China, that comes as a raw money, as a loan. You have to give it back. You have to pay it back. Or they buy you. And they are coming and buying. They are picking the gold eggs from the nests, which are in Europe. The strategy is very clever. But I think it's overestimation of all of that concept, Alex, what you mentioned. I'm more skeptical. I think it's more PR in that than the reality.
But money is unconditional, and that's something that might make a difference for countries that do lack investment and for regions that still score below the average in terms of competitiveness across the EU. Matt, can you give us a bit of an understanding of what's going on between US and China when it comes to the trade wars? What do you expect next? And maybe it's also a pattern that we could translate into how the US-EU trade war might unfold.
Well, I specialize in sort of Central Europe at this point, so I'm not the biggest China expert, but I would just offer a few comments because, I mean, this is not exactly rocket science. But although I might actually take a little issue with your use of the word trade war. War is sometimes a bit of an exaggeration. I understand the need to sort of, it makes good headlines, that sort of thing. But I mean, wars are different. I mean, we are arguing very, very seriously with China right now about money. There was this paradigm which pertained for several decades after the Communist Party of China decided to liberalize its economy, was sort of what the Germans call, Wandel durch Handel, which means like change through trade. That somehow or other trade and an investment would so transform the Chinese state that it would become a really responsible member of the international community. It would may not become a democracy immediately, but it would over time change rather significantly in that respect. Now, it's changed economically, of course, enormously, and it's also changed somewhat politically, but it remains a one-party dictatorship. It is an Überwachungsstaat, as the Germans say. It's like this surveillance state. It is and the economic side of it has proceeded in such a way that where this old paradigm of Wandel durch Handel, trade through change through trade, was basically done on Chinese terms, which was okay. We require your companies to transfer their technology to us. We penetrate your societies through industrial espionage and hacking, etc. We steal your trade secrets. We set the terms for investment and trade with us in such a way as to be advantageous to you, but also very seriously to us, and to create all sorts of dependencies. And this over time, people in the United States began to realize this was not exactly the way things should be working, and that paradigm was actually quite flawed. And so the Trump administration is trying to change that a bit, so that the terms of trade are more even, that the playing field is a bit more even, and of course that involves conflict because of course the Chinese government thinks it's got a pretty sweet situation. And of course, there are so many dependencies that Western societies, Western economies have off China that the Chinese have a lot of leverage, and of course, an ability to inflict pain. And the Chinese government is inflicting pain and using this their market power to intimidate countries from trying to change the terms in a way that's more attractive to them. So we have this, you know, that's a war. No, I'm not sure that's a war. It's an attempt to change a set of circumstances which have allowed to continue over time, and of course that involves rather significant, you know, whatever. That's the drama, and that's I don't know if it's a war, but it's certainly drama. It's pain in some respects, as it's difficult, but the Trump administration is determined to change that, and has gotten the attention of the Chinese state, and we'll see where it goes.
Some pundits might disagree with you. I'll get to you then. That it is a full-blown war, and actually Timothy Gertenash at Globsec Forum back in June said, actually, we feel like it's a new Cold War between the US and China, and that has severe implications also for the Europeans. Then what is your take on it?
Yeah, I just want to mention one thing, because of course I also share Matthew's opinions about the word wars, and I put it like commercial frictions. And I want to say one thing. During our presidency of the EU, we had, being a very transatlantic country, we had a strong preoccupation to try to, you know, navigate to this, you know, frictions, and try to use any opportunity we've got to bring the two sides of the Atlantic together, even more so as we did. So our strong preoccupation, at least in my department on the East, was knowing the common approach the European Union, the European member states, and the US has on many developments in the East, and I'm talking about the neighborhood rather than going far east, was to bring and use any opportunity we've got to also bring US expertise in the discussions in the EU and vice versa. So basically it was, and talking about what I said earlier, it was our modest contribution to trying to keep continuously this transatlantic link, from which I think we have to be extremely, let's say, proud of and strongly consolidate. So this is one thing that we've done, I wouldn't say aggressively, I would say actively throughout the 6 months, when we talked about Central Asia, when we talked about Republic of Moldova, Ukraine, bringing US and EU trying back together, knowing that despite of these commercial frictions, the strategic outlook and views and assessments were more or like the same.
I think that everybody hopes that that will continue to strengthen despite what's happening in the background. What is important, we are looking at China and Russia. We discussed EU, we did not tackle NATO. And as Brexit is just delivered or negotiated in Brussels, I don't think that we can have a European security architecture without the UK in a form or shape. So, Rasio, is NATO fit for the challenges of today and tomorrow? Where do we need to innovate when it comes to our security?
It's $1 million question. NATO was a very efficient organization for a long time. During the Cold War, NATO was absolutely, and probably in the West, and even in the modern human history, NATO was the most successful military alliance. But we see, you know, a mixed bag of things today. I was mentioning already the approach of Trump administration to NATO. Even Congress has got so scared, you know, they were passing special law that United States, or it will be more complicated to pull out of NATO, given some of the tweets of President Trump. So we see U.S. little emotionally detached from that, but also when we look at the European side, and you know, I also said our friends in Moscow who were saying NATO is pushing here and it's pushing for more military competition. And I said, how could you explain on the earth to me what kind of military competition we are pushed into? If I would forget about Poland, probably a little bit of Romania. Well, Slovakia, I was State Secretary of Defense in early 2000. When I came in January 2000 at Defense, our tables were 47,000 soldiers, 1,100 battle tanks, 138 aircrafts, and let me go on and on. Today, 12,500 soldiers, tanks 55, half of them would not leave the barracks. The airplane, out of 136, it's 14 jets. So what is the military competition?
How do we get NATO fit for the future? What is the CE role?
We need to come back to one. You know what makes NATO, what made NATO efficient was that it stood the ground. I always said, you are as strong as, you know, in this movie of the Tolkien, of the Gandalf standing on that bridge with this Balrog, this giant with a whip approaching, and he stand the ground as a small guy saying, you shall not pass. And here we see within the NATO, a kind of a loss of will. But this is not happening only to political elites, this is happening to overall population, and there was lots of research done in Germany, France, a number of countries. Would you be willing to go and fight for your own country? Most people say, no, forget it, no way. You know, so we are lacking the dedication, we are lacking inner fire to fight, we are losing our capabilities, and we are not building the new capabilities which we need for hybrid threats. How we fight this info war, and it's very hostile. It's absolutely hostile and it's dangerous. There are many elements that we should not give up on the old way or the old-fashioned boots on the ground, because if shit happens, at the end of the line you will need boots on the ground, no question. But we are not getting even that properly, and we are not building what we need for new challenges. So here, if we don't wake up early, and we will only, you know, be taking note of what's happening within NATO and speaking of more capabilities, more efficient spendings every year, new language, but nothing new happening. And if we keep continuing about the European army, which is another bullshit because that's not going to happen. I'm always saying this is like you tell the girl you are going to date on the first date. I said, you know, you are so nice to me. Why wouldn't we start taking a mortgage and plan 3 kids together? This is an evolution. You know, she would just say goodbye to you. You know, it's an evolution.
I think Dan disagrees with you. Or?
No, sorry, I cannot.
What is Romania's perspective when it comes to NATO?
I am not in agreement with him, but he has valid points. You know, I just want to be
very diplomatic.
Polite. Valid points, but I'm not agreeing. I see many youngsters in the room. I don't want to sell them an image where NATO is not fit to sit, you know, to respond to the challenges, because it's simply not true. As I stated before, I still believe in that common values that we have and that unite us. Yes, it's not fit to, you know, resolve the fake news.
We got nothing better, I agree. Don't take me wrong.
We, like 5 years ago, had nothing on our soil. Yet we have structures, command, intense presence, more exercises, Black Sea, NATO standing naval maritime groups coming to the Black Sea. We got the US coming in also with other allies. It's not that simple to say, you know, NATO is in crisis. NATO was not built only for the Cold War. NATO was built on a backbone of like-minded countries that share some principles and share some values. And I will die saying so, that NATO is still relevant and has that energy that can build only also for the future. And this is resilience. This is a thing that we are now discussing in NATO. How do we build resilience inside the country so we can defend better to the new threats that we're experiencing? It's a modest, let's say, progress because we are so many. It's easier for a department somewhere, I'm not going to name the capital, to target somebody while we have to stand around the table among ourselves and agree on different specificities of the countries. But we are moving forward. And the fact that even after 4 years of the illegal annexation of Crimea, you still got an ongoing response by NATO, it shows that there is preoccupation and that we are adapting. Probably slower than expected by the experts and probably slower than expected even by the population, but still, we are on the right track. So my take is more optimistic because what is the alternative? You know, I've been hearing a lot of, you know, but what is the alternative? Should we relinquish democracy, rule of law, and trying to get other models to build on? No. I still believe we've got to fight for what we have.
Well, I hope that that message is heard across, not just in this room. But I do want to get to you, because President Trump has been very vocal about fair burden sharing, There is currently something going on between the United States and Turkey when it comes to northern Syria, two NATO allies. And we will move to questions. I did not lose time. But how do you see NATO fit for future, and how is the US contributing to that?
Well, it's funny you should ask, because I wanted to actually address that very point that Rastio made a few sort of barbed comments about the United States and NATO. I mean, I get where you're coming from, but I also would remind you that, or maybe recall that a very important speech that President Trump gave in Warsaw a couple years ago, which sets forth his views on the NATO alliance, et cetera. So, I mean, but your point about burden sharing, though, runs very deep in. I think I'm not a psychologist, but if you look at you know, sort of utterances, you see this burden sharing theme come again and again and again. And it runs rather deep also. It has become deeper, more prevalent in the psyche of the American voter as well over time. During the Cold War, there was never a question about this. The Allies were all you know, committing what they had pledged to do. There was never any real doubt about that. But over time, through the 90s and into the aughts and now into the present day, quite a number of allies are not living up to what they have pledged, and this over the course of many years, decades, starts to get noticed, and the attempts by every administration prior to this one to remind the allies of their commitments. And you know, fell on deaf ears, and so this idea of sort of saying, "Excuse me, folks, would you please do what you say you have pledged to do," and actually make a pest of yourself. In fact, make yourself very unpopular by raising your hand and say, "Excuse me," and doing so in rather blunt terms. That's of course not the sort of thing that is designed to win friends and influence people, but it does have an effect. But it reminds because of the results have been rather significant during this whole process of reminding folks about the allies about the importance of burden sharing. Now, of course, some allies don't need reminding. They feel it, they understand it, and they are at where they said they would be, and constantly and whenever things start going south, or you know, the need comes for assets or assistance, they raise their hand, and others are not in that category. And so this idea of burden sharing, I would actually, in fact, encourage people, rather than pointing the finger at the president of the United States, for example, I would encourage them also to look at those states that continually over many years have resisted, have basically you know, almost fought against burden sharing in the ways that they used to step up, and have done so basically with a I wouldn't say with a middle finger, but just basically said, sorry, we're not participating. And this you know, to shine the light on that as a fundamental cause of this grouchiness, or this, you know, this dissatisfaction, which has led to a lot of the unpleasantness that Rastio is referring to.
But what is important is that actually CE countries started to live up to the expectations.
CE
and
countries have been, most of them have been very good.
The first.
They're in the top,
and that's important
of the class, as it were.
To be said in the context of moving the alliance forward and ensuring that innovation happens even through burden sharing, if the case. We do need to get to questions, and while we have the mics ready and probably questions raising, I do want you to answer in 30 seconds each if and how our political system is fit for 5G, AI, augmented realities, and all the digital innovation that comes down our way. How do we get ready for that? How do we adapt our political system or our system of governance to it? Who's starting? The 30 seconds?
5G and, well, I don't know. I should also, you know, import from Matthew what he said. I'm not an expert on 5G and on digital thing, but there is a high preoccupation which is going on right now, and we are increasingly learning in the learning process, and we are advancing. I don't know exactly what you want me to answer at this question, but the thing is, there is, for instance, in the Romanian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, we started 2 years ago a Bureau of Strategic Communication and the Bureau for taking care of the cyberspace, which tells you that, you know, we are advancing. Of course, it's not an easy task that I would, but on 5G, I think, and on others, I would my response will be very swift. We, as I mentioned at the beginning, have chosen our strategic alliance with the European Union and the US. And I think this answers it, the whole package.
But digital innovation will still be coming, and we cannot stop it.
I owe you one answer.
Matt, 30 seconds?
So 5G is a revolutionary technology which also has European competitors. There's not one way of doing 5G. There are others as well. And I think we have to, our societies have to realize that that it offers such opportunities to surveil our society, and this is not just a matter of whose system is can be deployed quicker or more cheaply. This is national security big time, and it has profound implications for our societies. And I think that we've managed to raise the issue put it on the agenda, and get countries to think about it not only as a pure economic issue, but as a national security issue, and to consider the fact that there are other alternatives out there that are European and that offer a different model. So this is very, very important.
You pick it up on 5G, digital innovation and disruption of political system?
I think generally people has no clue what's going on. And politicians even less. And I think here we are not ready for what is coming at all at the speed and content. And I mean in the good terms and in the bad terms. I got into this as my son tragically got blind 5 years ago. And he sees nothing, and he will be able, and he could see through bionic vision. And this is not only about AI, this is about whole cloud of package which coming with the digital and merger of digital and human, which is coming. It's beyond control of national. It's going to change world upside down. And if I had an answer to you, I wouldn't be sitting here. I'll be making such a big bloody money that I'll be probably extremely rich man. But my simple answer is, people has got very little clue how this is going to change the world we are living in.
So I hope that we tackle into a later panel. We have a question here, 30 seconds, your name, affiliation, and the question, and to whom you address it, please.
Thank you. I'm retired Major General Paul Hormuz, and thank you very much for very excellent points. I'm sure that if the conversation will be for another half an hour, we'll get more and more interesting things because people are more and more open. When was discussed here at the beginning about complexity, volatility, uncertainty, and ambiguity, I just remembered that this concept was practically launched in 1987. I believe that EU and NATO are very capable of doing what they are supposed to do. The only question which I have is, how can we keep the stress on common values in an era of promoting very strong national interests? Because that's what we see. Thank you.
Very fair point. Are there any other questions in the room? There is a question in the back. We take 3 at a time, so we give the panelists the chance to answer.
Hi, George Coman from Ager Press News Agency. For Secretary Boise, I have 2 questions, please. Will the U.S. troops stationed in Romania will be part of Defender 2020 exercise next year? And the second one is maybe you could comment on the U.S. withdrawal from the INF. Thank you.
So one is about US withdrawal from INF, and the first one is about the troops stationed in Romania, part of the exercise next year. Let's start with those two, and then we talk about the values.
I don't know for a fact on the Defender 2020, but I would assume the answer is yes, because this is a very large multinational exercise. So I would be kind of surprised if it weren't, but I'm not 100% sure. And on the INF, sorry, I didn't catch the INF question.
The INF treaty.
Yeah, well, I mean, yes. We found sufficient reason sufficient evidence on the part of Russian behavior that they were violating the treaty and for such a long time, and showed the evidence to all of our allies who were persuaded. So, I mean, this is an unfortunate a fact of life, and it's I'm afraid it fits a pattern of Russian behavior, which is manifesting itself in other ways as well. So, these arms control treaties are great as long as all parties abide by them. But that's unfortunately not the case. Wasn't the case in this one, and there are other cases now too where we're starting to take note.
In a transaction-driven world, how do we stress more our common values? That was the question.
I can answer that. 30 seconds? Yeah, okay. No country can do it alone. So you need solidarity. So one point, even national interests will also be looking towards, solidarity and others. If I were to be very pragmatic and open with you and friendly, I would say two ways. Having a better diplomacy to explain anyone what is their interest to be together, and second, invest in education and in young generation. They need to know that solidarity counts. They need to know that only together we can make things better. So that's, I don't have an answer definitely, but I think these two things will be, in my view, something to invest for the future in order to try to bring those focused countries on their own interest to think that you need to have a like-minded approach.
But aren't we failing at doing that then? Rastya?
General, you put a key question. I think that in the history of last 100 years, the combination of values and the interest as in the balance and in the composition produce the best results. It goes with the US history, it goes within European history. And if we if we distort this balance, then we risk. If you distort it for too much of a national egoism, then the world this will produce will be very cynical and very rude and very raw. If we put it only on the values, the world which we will produce probably will be very naive and very vulnerable. So we need to keep the balance in there. I always say when she's nice, but she's also rich, that's the best match. But here, I don't know. This national egoism, which is spreading like a fire, this is a temporary reaction to technologically driven globalization, which is happening in the world. And pendulum will swing one day back. The only question is where this will go, what will be the collateral damage, and when it will swing, and what will be the cost of that swing. That's the only question to me today.
And who will pick up the pieces? Please.
Andrew Noble, I'm the British ambassador in Bucharest. One of the things that was said at an early stage in the discussion was the difference between fact and feeling. So the same phenomenon as a fact and the same phenomenon as how people react to it. Isn't that our biggest challenge, actually, especially those of us who represent governments? Because it's not necessarily the annexation of Crimea that matters to all of our voters most. But it is things like the impacts of the demographic time bomb in Africa, and it is things like climate change. And it seems to me, as somebody who was in my mid-20s living in Romania under Ceausescu, that one of the things that's changed is that the sense of threat has moved from state to state or terrorist group to state or whatever, to the impact on the individual. And that's where 5G and similar developments also impacts. And I just wonder whether governments have yet worked out how to talk to their citizens in the democratization of information through the internet and the democratization of problems if you are going to be flooded out by a hurricane or if you are going to have to share your schools with people who you do not think should be in your country.
very, very fair assessment, because what it seems is that we move from fear of the past to fear of the future, and we fail to explain that the future is not so dark and gloomy as you Dan said. Who wants to pick up what the ambassador? Go ahead.
This is not only a challenge for governments. Here, the responsibility lies on a number of shoulders, including the civic society and everybody. Government would not handle, and even governments are becoming less and less credible sellers of anything like this, of the message. I think there are two things here which we need to do, and one is transparency, and second is responsibility. Because this is to fight the disinformation. This is not to limit the information flow. This is make it transparent, and if it's transparent, we need to know who is saying this, where this is born, and then making those who are saying that responsible. Because if you lie, or if you just say things which are wrong, or which are sometimes even against the law, like hate, it's a problem. Threatening somebody that I will cut your balls, it's happening to me often on the public debates, is anonymously saying, I will cut your balls, I will hang you. I'd like to see that, who is saying that. And please tell it to my face, stand in front of me and say, I'm going to cut your balls. Nobody's doing that, you know, so we need to bring transparency, and we need to make people responsible for what they say, and this will be quick end. But this is very hard, and even technically it's very hard. But we need to get up our brains and do it. But it's not only for governments. We need to create a big coalition which will go across, including business, including civic society, including the government.
Our time is running up, and I do need to give one, some final remarks, 30 seconds each, but it's a question instead of final remarks. What keeps you awake at night for the next decade, or for the next 3 decades?
I will not answer to that. There are many things that keep me awake at night, from work and also my kid and others. But I will quote for what Churchill said, you know, because I think it was the matter of this debate. He said, the democracy is the worst form of a government except of all of the others. So I think that's very telling about what we have discussed today. Thank you.
Am I next?
You are.
What keeps me awake at night? I would say a concern that the freedoms and the prosperity that we have taken for granted for such a long time, on which that have benefited our societies so much for so many, decades, centuries, whatever, that they may erode, and we may be find ourselves in a different situation in whatever number of years, that because this is a pretty sweet situation we've got here in our societies, and we can't take it with we can't take this for granted, and we have to, I think, keep working at it to ensure that this continues well into the future for our children and grandchildren and great, et cetera, et cetera.
Good. Good to know.
Frankly, I'm very often, the most often, I think how to make my son to see again. That's the thing. But on the top of that, we think always, we got our Western mentality that we are raised in a positive thinking, and if you say something which is alarming or a little skeptical, then you are labeled being pessimist, paranoid. I got once a chat with a former head of Mossad who said, look, you're in the West Europe, this positive thinking. You think that things will always end up well, and you are lacking sense of having strategy for individual survival if shit happens. That often wakes me up through the nights.
I think that this is the end of this panel, so please join me in thanking the panelists for the discussion that we had today. And Alina.
And also, please join me in thanking the moderator who did a great job in getting this first panel, guiding it. We do have a 15-minute coffee break, but it's a 15-minute coffee break because then we have to move into the second panel.
Îmi face o deosebită plăcere să deschidem împreună o nouă conversație, de data aceasta cu o persoană din Germania, un român din Germania, un român care ne va povesti ce se poate face într-o comunitate cu inițiativă și domnul Octavian Ursu, vă rugăm. Și, împreună cu domnul Octavian Ursu, Cosmin, ne va ajuta să moderăm această discuție. Sigur. Succes!
Mulțumim, bună ziua! Bună ziua, domnule primar!
Bună ziua!
Aș vrea să le mulțumesc organizatorilor că ne oferă un moment de reflexie. Mi-ar fi plăcut să fie cu noi foarte mulți politicieni, pentru că ar trebui să participe la această reflexie împreună cu noi. Zilele astea constatăm că există o stranie râmă în mintea unor politicieni din România. Râma asta îi face să creadă că pentru a scăpa, de exemplu, de o casă care arde, ea trebuie să mai ardă puțin. Sau că e imposibil să se înțeleagă pentru ca noi să obținem stabilitate. Ok, este instabilitate, ce-ar fi să mai fie puțină instabilitate pentru ca după aceea să scăpăm? Cam asta este logica. Sunt vreo 6 pisici care nu vor să intre într-un sac. Și eu găsesc că istoria dumneavoastră extraordinară, domnule primar, este relevantă pentru ce ni se întâmplă și așa ajungem la reflexie. Pentru că, domnule primar, trebuie să le spunem și invitațiilor noștri, sunt sigur că mulți dintre ei știu, dar pentru cei care n-au povestea la secundă, să le spunem că atunci când ați candidat, la sfârșitul lunii mai și la al doilea tur al alegerilor de la dumneavoastră de la Görlitz din Saxonia în luna iunie, a fost al doilea tur, dumneavoastră ați fost ajutat de contracandidații dumneavoastră. Iată ce poveste extraordinară pentru politicienii din România, de exemplu. După un sistem care nu seamănă cu al nostru, acum nu mai seamănă nici cât semăna până acum, pentru că deocamdată la alegerile locale vom avea un singur tur, la dumneavoastră există 2 tururi, iar în al doilea tur pot intra toți candidații. Dacă la primul nu reușește unul dintre ei să obțină majoritate absolută. Iar în cazul dumneavoastră, 2 dintre contracandidați s-au retras și v-au susținut, au făcut campanie pentru dumneavoastră, candidat CDU, ca să-l învingeți pe candidatul AfD. Și mai zic doar atât, pentru noi toți românii e un motiv de mare mândrie, că avem un român care este primul primar din Germania, dar povestea lui este una deosebită, pentru că a devenit primar în Germania, pe mâna partidelor concurente, pentru că a existat pericolul AfD. Și aici vă rog, domnule primar, să ne explicați. După aia sunt foarte curios care e relevanța pe care o găsiți dumneavoastră pentru politica, pentru situația politică de la noi de acum. Dar întâi, domnule primar, cum i-ați convins pe cei de la Verzi și de la Linke, stânga, să facă campanie pentru dumneavoastră? Incredibil.
Da, în primul rând mulțumesc pentru invitație și pentru ocazia de a vorbi aici în fața dumneavoastră. Cum i-am convins, nu a fost vorba numai de persoana în sine sau de partidul în sine, ci a fost vorba ce se întâmplă cu orașul nostru în situația respectivă. Iar campania electorală, mai ales a doua parte a campaniei electorală, a fost axată din partea mea, chiar de a doua zi, practic, după primul scrutin. Am spus că este vorba de viitorul orașului nostru. Orașul Görlitz se află la granița cu Polonia, trebuie să spunem, și ne numim oraș european, împreună cu partea poloneză. Avem o cooperare foarte strânsă de peste 20 de ani. Deci dimensiunea de cooperare europeană în orașul nostru are o importanță deosebită. De aceea eu am spus în situația respectivă, este vorba de viitorul acestui oraș. Vrem să continuăm acest drum deschis european, vrem să mergem pe acest drum sau vrem să închidem granițele, așa cum a propus sau cum au propus candidații partidului AfD la alegerile europene pe 26 mai. De ce alegerile europene? Pentru că alegerile de primar au fost în același timp cu alegerile europene. Deci s-au combinat anumite teme. Și în acel moment fronturile au fost foarte clare. În ce direcție mă mișc eu? Eu am fost pe locul 2, trebuie să spunem. În primul scrutin a câștigat primul scrutin cu o majoritate relativă, deci n-a fost de ajuns, e necesară majoritatea absolută. A câștigat candidatul AfD, iar în turul 2, după cum a spus și dumneavoastră, este nevoie de majoritatea relativă. Deci fronturile au fost foarte clare în acel moment, iar ceilalți care candidau și care știau foarte bine că nu vor avea șanse destule să câștige aceste alegeri, a urmat candidatul AfD, deci pe primul loc, iar eu pe locul 2, și dacă ne-am uitat la procente, era clar că o majoritate destul de mare, mai mult în direcția conservatoare este. Deci și-au făcut socoteală și au dat seama că dacă vor candida din nou, această situație va duce numai la victoria AfD-ului. Alt rezultat nu poate avea. Și de aceea s-au gândit care ar fi alternativele. Și alternativa am fost eu, dar eu cu temele mele și probabil și eu cu biografia mea. Pentru că a fost o situație deosebită, faptul că a candidat cineva, practic, care nu este născut în Germania, chiar dacă trăiește de aproape 30 de ani acolo, pe de o parte, iar pe de altă parte un candidat din partea AfD, care era născut, care vine din orașul respectiv și este și polițist, adică are o încredere deosebită în acest domeniu. Deci a fost o campanie electorală extrem de polarizantă, la urma urmei.
AfD, partid de extremă dreaptă, este prezent în conducerile, în guvernele și parlamentele, nu guvernele, în parlamentele tuturor landurilor, dar nu aveau nicio primărie. La Görlitz s-ar fi întâmplat pentru prima oară când AfD ar fi obținut un primar. De aceea, probabil și această coalizare, și ar fi fost o victorie simbolică în fața unui imigrant, nu? S-a făcut vorbire în campania electorală despre calitatea dumneavoastră de român?
Da, sigur că da. Sigur că da. Chiar
V-a atacat pe tema asta?
Da, sigur că da. N-a fost nicio surpriză. M-am așteptat la acest lucru, dar am ignorat faptul respectiv. N-am început să mă cert cu el pe această temă, pentru că cred că nu are niciun sens, ci am încercat să tematizez temele importante ale orașului, dezvoltarea noastră economică viitoare, deschiderea noastră europeană pe care o avem, care ne aduce și avantaje, deci cooperarea culturală în diferite domenii. Aceste teme m-au preocupat, dar și tema de securitate, pentru că tema de securitate și siguranță era tema principală a contracandidatului meu. Și de aceea am avut și un accent foarte puternic pe aceste teme.
Domnule primar, o să ajungem imediat și la Rusia prin Russia Today, dar într-unul dintre reportaje am văzut o doamnă din Görlitz, și aici o să vă rog să ne explicați puțin care este contextul acolo. Saxonia, granița cu Polonia, fost land al Germaniei de Est. În filmul Russia Today, o doamnă spunea: am de ales între ciumă și holeră. Pentru că erați dumneavoastră și domnul Vipel de la AfD, și acum explicați-ne care e situația acolo. Se vorbește despre oameni săraci, triști, șomaj peste media Germaniei, pleacă foarte mulți oameni, așa ca din România. Faceți-ne puțin contextul la Görlitz. Cine sunt cei care v-au ales? Cine sunt oamenii de la Görlitz?
Cei care m-au ales sunt majoritatea, după cum se vede.
55%.
A fost situația în sine extrem de neobișnuită. În regiunea noastră nu sunt prea mulți străini, iar, bine, eu practic nu mai sunt străin, sunt cetățean german, dar având această biografie, pentru mulți dintre concetățenii mei încă sunt străini, probabil, și de aceea această reacție a doamnei respective. Eu cred totuși că, cel puțin acum, în momentul de față, acesta este și greutatea sau sunt problemele cu care mă confrunt ca și primar. Trebuie să dovedesc cât mai mult că ceea ce am propus și temele cu care am fost în campania electorală, într-adevăr, se pot realiza. De aceea am și încercat și în campania electorală ca aceste teme, într-adevăr, să fie reale. Aceasta este o problemă generală, cred eu, a politicii, faptul de a promite lucruri care nu se pot realiza. Pentru că părerea mea este că majoritatea oamenilor nu au o viziune globală a unui buget sau unor probleme a unei țări sau a unei comune, ci ei se confruntă numai singular cu anumite teme. Deci când vii ca și politician și promiți anumite lucruri, unele lucruri care chiar nu se pot realiza, sigur că alegătorii te cred în acea situație.
Sunt landuri speciale astea din Est și ele sunt considerate fiefuri AfD. Publicul ăsta, cetățenii dumneavoastră care sunt oarecum supărați, au senzația că dincolo de investițiile făcute de Germania de vest, au rămas în urmă, că viețile lor nu s-au schimbat, constată că le pleacă foarte mulți concetățeni. Și am reținut că după alegeri dumneavoastră a spus ok, a câștigat societatea deschisă, este bine ce s-a întâmplat, acum trebuie să găsim o cale să ajungem și la cei care nu v-au votat. Ați reușit? Cum faceți asta? Asta din nou cu relevanță pentru mediul politic din România. La noi cetățenii nu sunt decât soldați în armata câte unui partid. Altceva nu ai voie să fii. Toată lumea se războiește cu toată lumea. Și totuși iată că cineva care câștigă alegerile se gândește din capul locului și la ceilalți. Ce faceți pentru ei? Mă gândesc că probabil ăștia sunt alegători de AfD, nu? Sunt militanții extremei drepte. Vă rog.
Deci a doua zi după alegeri, după ce am câștigat alegerile, am spus că campania electorală s-a sfârșit și din acest moment eu sunt primar al acestui oraș și voi trata pe toată lumea la fel. Nu există susținători și cei care nu m-au susținut, toți sunt cetățeni ai acestui oraș, iar datoria mea este să am grijă de toată lumea. Și în primul rând, datoria mea este să-i conving pe cei care nu m-au ales că totuși a intervenit datorită acestui fapt o situație pozitivă și că orașul va profita din acest lucru. Pentru că sigur că a fost o temă destul de relevantă, tema ce se va întâmpla dacă ar fi câștigat candidatul AfD. Și sigur că mulți au spus și eu am spus, va fi într-un mod se va reflecta într-un mod extrem de negativ asupra dezvoltării viitoare a orașului. Vom avea probleme cu investitorii care se vor gândi, să vedem dacă venim aici, dacă sunt condițiile necesare, dacă atmosfera este de genul ăsta, vrem să mai venim sau nu. Orașul Görlitz este un oraș deosebit de frumos, arhitectonic, deosebit de frumos și se produc foarte multe filme de la Hollywood la noi în oraș. Chiar din partea americanilor, din partea Hollywoodului, am primit anumite
A existat o scrisoare pornită de la un regizor de la Hollywood. Scrisoarea a fost semnată de actori, foarte mulți actori, arhicunoscuți, chiar și în România. Și toți oamenii ăștia le spuneau locuitorilor din Görlitz, nu vă lăsați pradă urii. Exact. Aproape că spuneau să vă voteze pe dumneavoastră.
N-au spus să mă voteze pe mine, dar a fost formulată la modul, aveți grijă cum votați. Gândiți-vă la ceea ce se va întâmpla. Și au fost semnate de mulți care cunosc orașul. Din acest motiv, nu numai că au auzit că acolo există o luptă electorală deosebită, ci din faptul că ei cunoșteau orașul și de aceea erau îngrijorați, într-adevăr.
Pericolul ăsta al naționalismului, al populismului, la nivelul întregii Germanii, să le spunem spectatorilor noștri, colegilor noștri de aici din sală, că în campania electorală contra candidatul dumneavoastră, polițistul Vipel, de la AfD, a avut un slogan care suna în felul următor: orice decizie este bună dacă ea este relevantă la nivelul întregii Germanii. Deci, în mod clar, AfD căuta o victorie simbolică la Görlitz. Un polițist AfD, naționalist de extremă dreaptă, împotriva unui imigrant, iată în cazul nostru român, ar fi fost o victorie simbolică pentru toată Germania și primul primar AfD. Asta a însemnat că împotriva dumneavoastră AfD-ul a pus toate armele în joc, nu?
Absolut, toate armele. A fost clar, din faptul cum au dus campania electorală, cu ce mijloace materiale au adus această campanie, a fost foarte clar că nu este alegerea unui primar într-un orășel din Germania, ci că a avut o altă putere simbolică și datorită faptului că câteva luni, 2 luni mai târziu, practic la 1 septembrie, au avut alegerile pe land, au avut loc alegerile pe land în Saxonia, iar ei au spus întâi luăm orașul și după aceea landul. Le-au pierdut pe amândouă.
Pericolul naționalismului la nivelul întregii Germanii, cum îl percepeți?
Este datoria celorlalte partide să dovedească că au soluții mai bune decât naționaliștii și populiștii. Aceasta este greutatea, pentru că să promiți anumite lucruri într-un mod foarte simplu te face foarte credibil la majoritatea populației. Să explici o parte din populație că anumite lucruri nu sunt posibile și vor dura mai mult, este mult mai complicat. Dar eu încerc în toate discuțiile, și în Germania, și acolo au multe discuții loc, încerc întotdeauna să spun să ne bucurăm de faptul că avem democrație și să ne bucurăm de faptul că unele lucruri nu se pot întâmpla atât de repede. Eu am crescut aici, în București, am plecat la 22 de ani și știm foarte bine că înainte de 89 hotărârile se luau foarte repede și totul se întâmpla imediat, de azi pe mâine, iar timpurile care le-am trăit atunci nu vrem să le mai trăim încă o dată. De aceea democrația lucrează cu altfel de mijloace, lucrează cu coaliții, lucrează cu discuții și câteodată trebuie să avem răbdare.
După alegeri, șefa partidului dumneavoastră, Annegret Kramp-Karrenbauer, v-a felicitat și a spus așa: victoria lui Octavian Ursu este victoria unei largi coaliții, căreia îi sunt recunoscătoare. Din nou, în logică politică românească, asta este mind-blowing. Să le mulțumești partidelor concurente, care au alte interese, aveau chiar și alți candidați, pentru reușita propriului candidat, pe mine mă lasă fără cuvinte. Dar mi-ați explicat că și în logică germană nu e chiar atât de des întâlnit.
Nu, a fost o situație neobișnuită, dar a fost o situație care i-a pus pe foarte mulți pe gânduri. Ce facem aici, ce se întâmplă aici, în ce direcție ne mișcăm, ce se va întâmpla cu orașul, ce se va întâmpla cu landul, ce se va întâmpla mai târziu cu întreaga țară. Și de aceea a avut dimensiunea pe care a avut-o și, din fericire, majoritatea s-a hotărât să mă aleagă pe mine, nu pe mine ca și persoană, sigur ca și persoană, dar să aleagă o anumită direcție politică liberală, o anumită direcție politică europeană, ceea ce este important.
Ne-ați vorbit despre alegerile la nivel de land, au fost alegerea dumneavoastră în Saxonia, au fost și în Brandenburg alegeri. și AfD-ul a câștigat multe puncte față de precedentele alegeri. E adevărat că la dumneavoastră CDU a fost pe primul loc și mi se pare că în Brandenburg totuși SPD a fost pe primul loc. Dar avansul ăsta al AfD-ului continuă? Am ajuns la tipping point? Sau ei merg mai departe? Marșul triumfal continuă? Au și câștigat alegerile europene, să spunem.
Dacă ceilalți au soluții mai bune și sunt mai convingători, au ajuns la punctul maxim. AfD-ul, eu sper că au ajuns la punctul maxim. Ce se întâmplă? În estul Germaniei sunt mulți sau o parte din populație nemulțumiți de anumite lucruri care nu s-au întâmplat în ultimii 30 de ani. Eu le spun la mulți, uitați-vă ce s-a întâmplat în alte țări din estul Europei și faceți comparația, pentru că totuși au fost avantaje mari în estul Germaniei datorită faptului că Germania de vest a ajutat într-un mod deosebit, a avut posibilitatea să ajute. Deci unii sunt mulți, o parte din populație sunt nemulțumiți de anumite lucruri care nu s-au realizat, lucruri de infrastructură, poate anumite biografii care n-au mai avut succes după 1990, au devenit șomeri, n-au mai reușit să găsească de lucru. Deci nu există numai câștigători a acestui proces care a avut loc după 1990, dar totuși sistemul în sine dă șanse tuturor. Cred că trebuie să fim mai sinceri, în general, ca și politicieni. Asta spun și în Germania, dar cred că este valabil peste tot, să le spunem la oameni că să nu se aștepte ca statul să pună totul la dispoziție sau să te ajute în norocul tău personal. Fiecare dintre noi trebuie să ne dăm silința să facem ceva, să realizăm ceva, să muncim pentru ceva. Este de fapt ceea ce a spus Kennedy. Gândește-te ce poți să faci tu pentru orașul sau pentru țara ta, nu ce să facă țara pentru tine. Acesta este încă valabil.
V-ați bucurat de foarte multă atenție din partea televiziunilor rusești. Dumneavoastră, Görlitz, alegerile de la Görlitz, aș zice că mai degrabă polițistul Vipel s-a bucurat de atenția lor, pentru că nu mi-aduc aminte să fi văzut vreun film la vreo televiziune rusească numai despre dumneavoastră. Am văzut foarte multe numai cu polițistul Vipel și sunt foarte curios dacă ați simțit în vreun fel și altfel decât în felul ăsta prezența Rusiei. A fost acolo?
Au fost foarte multe televiziuni internaționale, posturi de televiziune internațională în Görlitz și presă internațională. Nu i-am simțit în mod direct. Au luat interviuri acolo în oraș. Ceea ce s-a făcut simțit, nu știu dacă are legătură numai cu postul respectiv sau cu platforma din internet de la Facebook, dar am primit și amenințări, mai ales după câștigarea alegerilor, care...
Amenințări din partea cui? Știți? Erau anonime sau cum? Cum s-a întâmplat?
Au încercat unii dintre ei să rămână anonim, dar n-au reușit. Trebuie să spun că organele de siguranță din Germania m-au ajutat într-un mod foarte eficient. Și deci a fost o atmosferă foarte, foarte încărcată în acest mod și ceea ce m-a surprins, mai ales că după alegerea asta s-a întâmplat, probabil că mulți nu au vrut să creadă că se poate întâmpla așa ceva, că AfD-ul nu va câștiga sau că cineva, un migrant, un fost migrant, poate câștiga un post de primar acolo.
Știți, în Germania există celebra poveste a violului din gara Köln, care n-a existat niciodată. A fost creat de televiziunile din Rusia în așa fel încât la un moment dat chiar ministrul de externe al Rusiei să vorbească despre asta. Și mai știți de asemenea că AfD-ul se bucură de o atenție specială din partea Rusiei. Se vorbește inclusiv despre posibilități de a primi bani, de a fi finanțați. Încă nu au fost dovedite cum au fost dovedite în Suedia sau și mai nou în Italia. Dar revin la întrebare. Ați simțit ceva ne la locul lui? Ați simțit că se întâmplă ceva care faceți politică de multă vreme. Ați condus CDU în Land, în Saxonia. Spuneți-ne dacă de data asta a fost altfel. Și aș adăuga aici avertismentele venite chiar de la cancelarul Germaniei, care spunea că la toate episoadele de alegeri vor fi provocări. Și trebuie ca instituțiile statului să se pregătească pentru asta. Dar aici avem nevoie de simțul dumneavoastră. Cum a fost?
Atmosfera în sine la alegeri s-a schimbat în general. La alegerile mele, la alegerile pe land, observăm că s-a schimbat complet. Alegerile s-au digitalizat foarte mult, au loc și în internet și prin medii în general, dar nu mai au așa mult loc în fața televiziunii, totuși, sau în ziar, ci s-au digitalizat într-un mod foarte intensiv. Și
asta înseamnă că provocările sunt diferite.
Sunt diferite și se umblă foarte mult cu zvonuri care e foarte greu într-un mod efectiv de a le...
Să le urmărești și să afli de unde au
și
pornit.
să afli, să spui adevărul după ce s-a pus un zvon în circulație.
Și să le contracarezi.
Să le contracarezi este extrem de greu.
Dar ați încercat în vreun fel? V-ați organizat în vreun fel împotriva acestor zvonuri care mergeau pe social media?
Da, sigur. Am lucrat și noi, și eu și echipa mea cu social media și s-a mutat practic campania electorală în social media.
Mai avem puține minute, domnule primar. Mi-ați spus mai devreme și mi-a plăcut că deja trăiți în Germania de mai mulți ani decât ați trăit în România. Și vă considerați în continuare român? Sau cum vă considerați?
Sunt și român și german. Voi rămâne întotdeauna și român. Este logic. M-am născut aici, am trăit peste 20 de ani aici în București. Este orașul meu natal și asta am spus și la o discuție. Am avut o discuție acum 2-3 săptămâni în Dresda, în Frauenkirche, o discuție despre patrie. Și am spus că eu am două patrii. Patria mea trecută, care este România și va rămâne întotdeauna patria mea, și patria mea actuală, care este Germania, pentru că sunt cetățean german. Deci va rămâne întotdeauna.
Asta este o temă întotdeauna în Germania, mai ales după al doilea război mondial, și mi-aduc aminte că un fost președinte al Germaniei, întrebat dacă își iubește țara, apropo de limita asta foarte fină între patriotism și naționalism, omul a zis așa: îmi iubesc nevasta, îmi iubesc familia, îmi iubesc prietenii, îmi iubesc vecinii, cred că este suficient. Domnule primar, ați studiat la Universitatea Națională de Muzică de la București. Mai sunteți solist la Filarmonica din Görlitz?
Nu, sunt altfel de solist acum.
Acum sunteți. Dar la trompetă mai cântați?
Da, pot să cânt, dar nu am timp, din păcate.
Aveți o relație specială cu instrumentul, presupun. Relația asta nu voia nimeni.
Am o relație
nici măcar polițistul Vipel.
Nu. Chiar dacă a încercat să râdă de faptul că sunt muzician, dar sigur că am o relație specială cu instrumentul meu și când am ocazia, cânt.
La primărie?
Nu la primărie, dar în big band.
Vă mulțumesc mult. Vă mulțumesc, domnule primar, că ați fost cu noi astăzi aici, pentru că ne-ați povestit prin ce ați trecut și toate felicitările noastre. Un român a fost motivul unei coaliții, repet, absolut incredibil pentru logica politică din România. Au fost partide care au renunțat la proprii candidați ca să vă susțină pentru dumneavoastră. Nu e invitație pentru nimeni, mai ales că e campanie electorală. Nu invităm pe nimeni din România să renunțe la proprii candidați, dar să se gândească și la altceva decât la interesul lor politic, da, să facă. Mulțumesc mult, domnule primar.
Vă mulțumesc și eu.
Excellent discussions and a real example for our persons in Romanian politics that may decide to be together for a common objective. We discussed till now where we are after 40 years, especially the trends and developments in politics, security, and relation with the international organizations. We are proposing you to discuss now about the economics. And we have a great panel with great persons, 5 persons that for sure will inform us more about the trends and developments related to a new economical model. Recently in US, near to 200 CEOs decided a new wording related to the purpose of an organization. And there are significant changes, and I'm wondering how we may localize that purpose, that changes in our country. I will invite now Mr. Steven van Groningen, CEO Raiffeisen Bank and board member Aspen Institute, Daniela Iliescu, CEO Patria Bank, Mark Davis, CEO for Romania and Bulgaria, BERD, Clara Volentiru, our expert in Aspen Institute in related economical subjects, and Roger van den Brink, lead economist World Bank, together with the moderator for this panel, Andrew Vrobel.
Do we need take a seat here? I think we will need one more chair. So good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us for this panel. We need some rearrangements, but we'll do it very quickly. Thank you so much. Thank you. So it's really great to be here in Bucharest for the 3rd time at the Bucharest Forum. I've been coming here since 2017 now, so it's like a routine. So I'm always happy to come back. My name is Andrew Vrobel, and I am the founding partner at Emerging Europe. I'm responsible for strategy and for content. Emerging Europe is a intelligence, news, and community platform that discusses 23 countries of Central and Southeastern Europe. I can see we're getting closer together. That will be nicer. It's really interesting that the panel discussion that we're going to have right now, that we're starting right now, is called Emerging Europe at 30. When we adopted the term Emerging Europe to call our organization 6 years ago, we wanted to make sure that we actually come up with a name that will represent the region. And correct me if I'm wrong, but very often the word emerging is referred to as developing. And in our understanding, it's slightly different. We are saying that the region is moving away from something specific. We know what it was 30 years ago, and it's coming into view. That's our perspective. And it seems that 30 years ago, that's exactly what happened. And now, at 30, Emerging Europe has in my opinion, been a success. Of course, there are different levels of this success, and that depends on a number of different issues. But what we would like to talk about today is to see how we can actually make sure that another 30 years are going to be even better. So without further ado, I would like to, first the ladies, introduce themselves. I would like all of the panelists to reintroduce themselves very briefly, and we're going to start the discussion. So let's start.
My name is Daniela Iliescu. I am CEO of Patria Bank, a bank operating here in Romania with a clear mission and goal to support the growth of financial intermediation and financial inclusion. And along the panel, I hope to have the chance to give you more insights on this aspect.
Hello, thank you for having me on this panel. My name is Clara Volintiru. I am Associate Professor at the Bucharest University of Economic Studies, and I am in charge of the Economic Opportunities and Financing the Economy program with the Aspen Institute Romania.
I'm really happy that we have two ladies on the panel.
Good afternoon. I'm Rogier van den Brink, or if that's too difficult for you, Roger van den Brink will do too. Until a few weeks ago, I was lead economist for EU member states of the World Bank based in Brussels.
Hi, I'm Mark Davis. I'm the Regional Director for Romania, Bulgaria at EBRD. And I think you know we're one of the biggest, if not the largest investor in the private sector in Romania over history. More than 8 billion investments cumulatively, a portfolio of around 2 billion right now. And 80% of our investments have been over time in the private sector. And we haven't done a public sovereign deal for 10 years.
And I'm Steven van Groningen, Steven van Groningen, for those that would like to have a go with the Dutch pronunciations. So I'm the CEO of the Raiffeisen Bank. I've been in this position since 2001, but I know Romania from much longer. My first visit to Romania was already in November in 1985. I'm also one of the founding members of the Aspen Institute.
So I think now you see why I'm always trying to ask the panelists to introduce themselves. With such difficult names, it is sometimes a challenge. So do you share my opinion about the success? Do you all share that opinion? So that's an open question. Whoever wants to take it first, maybe the lead economist for the World Bank or the EBRD.
Yes, and let me give you my personal story about that. I left the Netherlands in 1983. This was the height of the Dutch disease, if you may recall. And I went all over the world, lived in Africa, in the Philippines, worked on Mongolia. And when I came back to Europe a few years ago, and I traveled Europe, places like Poland, places like Bulgaria, Croatia, Romania, I was amazed. I was astonished at the success that Europe has become. Like I said, if you have a perspective from the wider world, and you see how difficult it is sometimes to get development going. Personally, I think the EU has been a fantastic success.
All right. The EBRD.
Question is success of EU or success of Romania?
No, I'm talking about the success of the transformation, because the panel discussion is about emerging Europe at 30. So has the region actually succeeded? That's my question. And my personal view is yes, to some extent, of course.
It depends on how you define succeed. I think you're in a world of counterfactuals. What was the potential and what has been achieved? Mm-hmm. It could have gone a lot of different ways. If you look at Argentina, I mean, there's a view that countries, if you come from after the break of the Soviet Union, the break of the Berlin Wall, other than a few cases like Estonia that kind of implemented liberal policies and went directly up, other countries implemented the same policies and went directly down. So Moldova, I used to be at the World Bank, and we worked on a paper with David Tarr, a trade economist, where we had the statistics from the Department of Statistics in Moscow, what price goods were traded at during the Soviet Union abroad through the intercompany relations. And what we found out was that Moldova had the largest terms of trade shock negatively of any country at the breakup. And Estonia benefited dramatically. It was about the product. So you implement good policies, and Estonia goes up, and you implement good policies. People vote with their pocketbooks. If things are getting better, they feel good about those policies, they support government, and things go in the right direction. Moldova, things went down further than any other country, and it became extremely difficult to implement good policies. And I remember I was a country economist for World Bank in Moldova back in the late 90s. The Storza government, Storza, a good businessman now, he was a prime minister, the guy was really trying to implement another shock therapy, and it was really what was needed. We saw what happened afterwards, and extremely difficult to get the political support to move those kind of structural reforms forward. So, you know, I think in that kind of context, each of these countries has gone a different way, and for me, the Romania story is interesting because I start to question what the counterfactual could have been and where the country is going based on the recent experience. We can come to that.
In my view, no one who has seen Bucharest in November 1985 can deny that we are living in a totally different place. That is uncomparable. And so I think not that is the question. And so I think from this point of view, yes, it is a success because we're talking about a totally different country. And maybe we are dealing with some of the, what sometimes you say, you know, a sick man has one wish, but a healthy person has many wishes. And I think we get to that point in time. But I do agree that when you travel through the country, and there are people that have totally missed out on the changes that have taken place. So Bucharest is not Romania. And if you travel in the countryside, you will see people for which life has not changed at all over the last 30 years. And the other question is of course, I totally agree with bringing the question about potential into the equation. Because if you ask the question, are we reaching our full potential, or are we moving at the speed at which we are moving towards what we should have to achieve our full potential, then the answer is no.
We're going to come back to this regional development aspect as well in a second, but I would like to look at the whole issue from yet a different perspective, because if you look at the world is not waiting for emerging Europe. So what the region has to do is not only to catch up right now, but also to make sure that it's competitive enough on the global arena. So if we look at it from this perspective, is that a success as well, or rather not? That's an open question for for you to think before.
I think I will spend just a couple more minutes on the previous question to bring into the answer the question of how do we measure success. Because the metrics at national level are astounding. If we look at the charts of GDP growth or export growth or whatever we want to find as metrics at national level, they tend to be positive. Of course, there are some issues with migration and other aspects, but overall, the metrics at national level tell a success story. Now, the problem is that we have very high subnational disparities in Central and Eastern Europe. And if we look at all European member states, it's only in Central and Eastern Europe that we find regions with lower than half the average GDP per capita per the whole of Europe. So in this sense, and if we think of other developed countries like Italy, you still think of grave disparities between North and South, and yet they're not as big as the ones that we still have in Central and Eastern Europe. But still, many regions have gone from less developed to more developed in this region, with the exception of larger countries. So for the countries such as Romania, or Bulgaria, or Hungary, or Poland, there is still a great battle to be fought in terms of creating inclusive growth and a more balanced economic development.
So we're going to come back to this redistribution again.
Right, and so just to bridge to your second question, I think there is huge potential and competitiveness in certain poles, capital cities and other areas. For example, if we look at the traditional metrics in our report, we looked at innovation, entrepreneurship, and access to financing, capital. And these are the three main success elements for economic development and competitiveness from the literature and from the empirical evidence. But we also added, for the case of Romania, the evaluation of public support at local level, because we need access to infrastructure, we need public investments, we need judicial access to European funding. That's a very high competitiveness element for developing countries in Central and Eastern Europe. So I think there's a success story in terms of internationalization potential. And my final point would be that if you look at voting patterns in the European Parliament, Central and Eastern European countries tend to vote massively in favor of further integration in the international marketplace than Western European countries. And that's a testimony to their success so far.
Daniela.
Yes, thank you. Indeed, I think aligned with my participants in the panel, we see Romania also as a success story so far, but it's important what's happening next. We see also Romania as split in two Romanias. We call it this way. There is some people look at regional level. We look at Romania split urban or larger urban areas where you see significant economic development and significant investments, whereas when we look at rural Romania, we see a total different world. And here we see first of all, as you mentioned earlier, Clara, GDP per capita, I think around one third of the GDP per capita in the large cities. And we see a significant lack of investment, and especially when it comes to investment in infrastructure, telecommunication. And we also see a significant lack of financial services addressing the needs of those living there or operating there.
Any other comments to the questions before I ask another one? Not really. Okay. So if we look at the region and the 30 years, the last 30 years, what do you think would be the most important lessons for the region going forward? Stephen?
My view is if we want to move ahead, then we need to define what our ambition is. If we don't define what our ambition is, it is kind of difficult to predict where you're going to end up. So, Romania is about, let's say, the 7th country in the EU in terms of surface. Romania is close to being the 7th country in the EU as population. So if we would then say, well, why don't we propose to be the 7th country in the EU in terms of economy? Maybe that's a bit too ambitious, and maybe it's a bit too far out. And there are a few big countries in that list as well. But maybe we should declare as an ambition to be the 10th country in the country. If we would have that ambition, then suddenly we should realize that we cannot keep doing what we're doing today. Not investing in infrastructure, not investing in education, not investing in technology, just blaming everybody for whatever we can blame. And so I think we talk a lot about potential, but I'm a former Olympian. I mean, I'm sorry. I was maybe not the most talented, but I had ambition. Yeah? And you can have talent or you can have potential. Without ambition, it's useless. So let's define some ambition for our region, our countries, Romania, and then figure out what we're going to do with the potential that we have. And if our ambition is just to be the champion of the local school, there's nothing wrong with it, but then we should say so.
So what should our ambition for the entire region first, before we go to Romania, be?
Well, I think it's up to each and every country, based on how they see their potential, to figure out what their role in the bigger picture is. But I think there are things in the region that we have to take care of. I mean, one of the things that you see these days, also with the elections in Poland, etc. So I spoke to investors in Romania recently, and then you see, actually they look at Romania in a much more positive daylight than we, the ones that are living in Romania, see Romania, because of the perspective. We simply seem to see the problems that we see straight in front of us seem to be so big, and we wonder that why others don't see this. Well, they don't see those because they also see the problems in the other countries. So yes, there are a number of regional issues that we have to deal with, and that is understanding maybe that, and anyway, some of them are not excluded to this region. If we really want to take, let's say, a democracy as a principle serious, then we should better be debating about what are the important themes in our society. And instead of ignoring them and considering it sufficient just to insult the other party. So and here, once we get our act together as countries, then I can think we can move on to the level of the region. I think there probably, I would think that there are opportunities today that we are missing because we are not working together enough as a region.
That is true. But just one short comment before I let you comment on that. I think that it is very typical of Romania to think, or Romanians to think very negatively about things, and there's much more to be, happy about and positive about. That's my sort of look at it. Gentlemen.
For the avoidance of doubt, I'm here by choice. So nobody has sent me here as a punishment. I'm here because I love it here. I think this is a great place to be, but I think I'm sometimes more ambitious than some others.
Two things. One on sort of where should Europe be going and where should it be investing more in, and then a comment about this divergence of regions within countries. Yeah.
Okay.
So first on sort of going forward with an economy that is more dynamic. We like to think of the EU, and by the way, I'm only talking about the EU. I have no remit for countries outside the EU. We like to think of the European market as one market. It is not. In goods it is, but in services it is not. Yeah? So the Belgian accountant cannot work in Portugal. The Italian architect cannot work in Germany. So actually the guilds that we're all very familiar with in Europe, they're still very much alive. And I think since manufacturing, sort of the old style labor-intensive manufacturing has had its day, it is really important that the services markets now picks up the slack. And in Europe, it cannot do that. That also links to the digital market. So I have lived in Belgium. Try and even order a bar of soap from Amazon. And you think, you click on the soap you want, and then it says, oh, this product cannot be delivered in Belgium. And you have to sort of roam around Amazon in Germany, in UK, in France, even to get a bar of soap. Yeah? So the services market is not one market, and that's a source of growth foregone. The digital market is not there. Yeah? So those are things as a region we should work on. By the way, talking about that in the context of Romania, I've been to the Timișoara area, I've talked to many farmers, but the first thing about sort of old-fashioned growth, there's no highway from Bucharest to Timișoara. Now the first rule of one market in the EU is you have a highway to Germany, yeah? If you don't have that, you leave all sorts of things lying on the table that you really shouldn't be, so that's one. Second of all, yes, I went outside of Timișoara, and immediately outside, you're in villages. These are un-European standards of living. Yeah? People don't have sanitation. It's really, that is something that should not be. Yeah? One thing, by the way, that can help there, as we know in Europe, is the agricultural subsidies. Yeah? We just did a study and we assessed the impact of these agricultural subsidies across Europe. And we find that in half of Europe, agriculture is no longer associated with poverty. Meaning in countries like Denmark, Holland, being a farmer is great. You're not poor, you're actually richer than the rest. In the other half of the countries, and that includes countries like Greece, like Italy, like Spain, like Romania, agriculture and poverty are very much linked. That need not be. These subsidies can be used and can be targeted in such a way that farmers, usually sort of the income group that you really care about, if you think about, you know, having a minimum living standards that gradually go up, you think about farmers. That needs to be changed. In Romania, for instance, instead of targeting these subsidies to really the small-scale family farmers, they are not capped. So there's no limit set to the subsidies. So very large landlords in Romania actually receive a lot of these subsidies. Those subsidies in countries like Denmark and Poland and Netherlands, they are capped so that it really benefits family farming. And that, for instance, is something that Romania could work on to make sure that that divergence within the country is neutralized.
I think it's just a question of the model of development, whether you want to continue to subsidize smaller economic agents or you want to create some industrial champions, as you might say. And I think there's a shift in the model of Central and Eastern European states, even in the case of Romania, from the first to the latter. So despite their traditional reliance on cohesion and agricultural policy and subsequent funding, they've started to be more and more preoccupied with digitalization policies and digitalization funds. They've started to create new hubs near university centers. And I think these are elements that can really contribute to a new type of era in the economic model of these countries. But that being left aside, I think it's not just a question of interventions and policies, it's also a question of the health of the economic sector itself.
On top of what my colleague said, I think it's important to think of what we can do or what can be done to achieve this economic growth. On one hand, on the public side or by the public authorities, but on the other hand, also by the private sector. Of course, again, I'm coming back to these less developed regions or to rural regions where we see indeed a need of significant investment in infrastructure, in telecommunication, and where access to finance comes is also an important barrier, because financial services usually come to these less developed areas or economies or regions after these at least two other pillars are at least started. Because once cash flow comes into a certain region or area, then economic activity starts to develop, companies start operating, and people start gaining income. And eventually there are significant barriers to finance. There are a couple of significant barriers to finance. One of them being, first of all, the level of income when we look at individuals. Second, also the level of collateral of assets or the wealth of these entities. And we think and we see there are models which, there are economic models for entities which, for financial entities which can come and contribute to the economic growth of these areas. But it's not, let's say, at least a financial institution is not a primary player in achieving this.
Any other?
Yeah, just to remind the question, because I think it's been a while since you asked this. The question was, what's the one thing that you would focus on? And from across the countries that I've worked in, for me, it's clear. It's very simple. It's governance. There's a governance growth dividend. It really matters. It's actually the thing that matters most. All the technical problems can actually be sorted out. We know how to do most things, and there are ways to sort. If the private sector is allowed to flourish, it will find a comparative advantage and it will generate wealth. It's about governance, but then we spoke of democracy and various forms of democracy we see as we go across different countries.
That was going to be my next question, actually.
Well, without getting into the politics now, because that's certainly not our area, but if you look at what governments need to do, to me there's three things that are needed. First, there has to be there have to be a will to do something. The government has to actually want to move forward in the right direction. And we know what the right direction is. It's not that hard to figure out. Two, there has to be political capacity. That is, if they move in that direction, can they stay in power and continue moving in that direction? And then third, there has to be technical capacity. Technical capacity, we have sorted. We can help with that. And there's plenty of technical capacity around the world that can be shared. But the first two ingredients are absolutely crucial. And when those things are in place, you see a growth dividend.
But don't you see that, for example, let's look at Poland. I mean, Poland has been the star of emerging Europe for quite some time, even in the times of the global economic or global financial crisis. It was the only economy that actually stayed, remained, was still growing, when everybody else was actually not growing. And isn't it that, on Sunday, Poles voted for the new government? Well, it's actually the same government. It's going to be the same government. And wasn't it in that case that trying to get that power without thinking what's going to be next, the most important element that actually drove everything? Because what's your take on that?
I'm not an expert in Poland at all.
No, I'm asking the whole panel, actually.
And don't want to get into.
It's not about politics. It's about looking at the things that should be done. As we said, we all know what should be done, basically.
It's a highly complex process, and there's a political cycle, a governance cycle, just like there are economic cycles. It's a question of where those governance cycles are going in a general trend over time. And I'll just come back to, I mentioned Argentina earlier. I think the thing about Argentina is, and the point I wanted to make was, it doesn't always have to get better. We think that in Romania, Poland, and, as we go further east, that it'll just keep getting better. It's just a function of cycles. And each cycle will be a little bit better, and we'll all be better off in the long run. Look at Argentina over the last 75, 100 years. Without the governance component, it doesn't necessarily get better. I think that's the key point.
I think if we're looking at subnational differences, whether they be rural, urban, or between regions, I think we should also look at the quality of governance at subnational level. And we tend to focus too much on political cycles at national level and forget the fact that the implementation of those policies is often residing with the political will or capacity of local governance agents. And my comment here would be that they have to make a shift in their paradigm as well. They have to start acting like economic agents and not just administrators of public goods. And I think that's a problem in the post-communist space, that local public administrations tend to think of themselves as purely administrators, not proactive actors, who are channeling, in effect, a very large amount of capital on their local markets, let's say. So if there is another lesson to be learned, I think that should be to create a more proactive governance at local level, not just national level.
Can one of our conclusions be that this regional distribution of growth or wealth is because those actors are not acting the way they should be acting?
I think if we look at the data for Romania, and I don't know if there are any available copies of our report for 2019, but please check it online. It's a report on local business environment index that we're doing with Aspen Institute yearly now. And if you look at the 2019 figures, you see Cluj having a more attractive business environment than Bucharest, because there were no blockage of funding, and because there is a high level of entrepreneurship at the local level. And Bucharest, which is the capital city, has a slowing down effect on channeling these developmental funding in terms of European funding or private capital expenditure. So I think there is a role to be played, either positive or negative, in the attractiveness of the local business environment.
Yeah, so I was thinking about Poland because a couple of years ago we did a report on what are the lessons that one can learn from Poland. And as a World Bank staff, we had read the stories about the East Asian miracle, you know, the Koreas, the Taiwans, the Hong Kongs, and the Singapores. And gee whiz, suddenly we had a European tiger, yeah? Because Poland has really reached high-income level status in record time, yeah? And certainly, if you look at the 17 governments, democratically elected governments that Poland had in place since the transition, they had this vision, there was a consistency, even though, so at the national level, you could definitely say the governance quality was fine. I think where maybe there were the challenges was in what you said, in the regions. And so again, if certain regions lag behind, even if it's not so much in absolute terms, but in relative terms, then there is an unease that starts to form. And that, as we were writing the report, and we saw that the absolute numbers were just fantastic, and we couldn't understand why Poles were not happy, we looked at these relative changes, and there something could have been the origin of the discontent that resulted in political changes. For instance, we had a joke in the beginning, the Poles aren't happy because they want to be like Germans, and they're still not like Germans. And it started out as a joke, and then we looked at German wages and Polish wages, and German productivity changes and Polish productivity changes. And we saw that in Germany, productivity increases were reflected in German wages. In Poland, much, much less so. And of course, being so close to Germany, we thought this might have, because much migration also, yeah? This must have had this idea of the Polish labor that, hey, I'm working hard, I'm educated, why am I not still where I should be? Similarly, in some of the regions, the eastern part of the country, this relative deprivation, although you couldn't call it deprivation, but this sort of lagging behind, definitely we thought was something that was at the core of the problem. And coming back to democracy and what others have said, yes, it's very important that local government responds to the citizens. I mean, it's great to have great leadership, but leadership has to always be accountable. And the better that mechanism works, and that's especially obvious at local government level, you know, is the road being repaired? Is the garbage being picked up? Is the teacher in the school? Those things really matter for governance across the world, whether you're in a democracy or not.
Okay, before I ask another question, I would like to ask if there are any questions from the floor. Oh, there is a lady here. Can we have a mic? In the first row, there is a... could you introduce yourself and ask a brief question?
I get one. I'm Alex Martin, I'm with Globsec. I'm not an economist myself, but recently the EU published the EU Regional Competitiveness Index. And as you look from Central Europe, East, South, and a bit in Western Europe, you see a very huge disparity between the green Western Europe and the purple. One element. Second, the EU adopted 2050 agenda and the move or the transition into carbon neutrality economies that will require probably around 1 trillion euro investment a year for multiple years. That's my second variable. The third one, the MFF negotiations go around 1.11 of the GNI. That's a very small part of the EU budgets altogether. And fourth, the IMF a week ago declared that we are in a synchronized slowdown, hitting probably an economic crisis next year. How do we move from here? Because I personally don't see how we can catch up to ensure that we are not creating an even bigger lag.
Well, I think the first question is, well, what can we do at the place where we are with the means that we have today? And that is, so it is not somebody else's job, but it's our job, everybody in his own country. Yes, so when you look around, the opportunities to increase productivity are incredible. So this gives you a sense like, well, you know, opportunity or potential, etc. then the question is, well, why aren't those then materializing? I'll tell you a short story. It was told by somebody who has a courier company. So he has a courier company, and one of his couriers went to Germany. And then after he met the guy after a long time, and he said, well, how is things in Germany? Fine, etc., etc. So how many deliveries do you make in Germany? And he said 140 a day. He said, it's impossible. We only do 70. I mean, the figures are approximately. We only do 70. And then he said, let's compare. So what car do you have? Car was the same. Oh. What software do you guys use? Software was the same. Anyway, after making all the comparisons, there were three things. In Germany, when you buy something online, you pay upfront. In Romania, when you buy something online, apparently, I always pay upfront, but apparently people want to pay at the moment of delivery, so the courier has to take the payment, the cash, the US terminals, etc., which slows down the process. Second, in Romania, a lot of people seem to be willing to open the box to see if in the box is what was on the invoice. The third thing is like in Amsterdam or in the Netherlands, or the same in Germany, when I'm not at home, they deliver to the neighbors with the nearest person that's willing to open their door, or if you live far away, they just put it in front of the door, and that's it. And in Romania, it doesn't happen. So now my question is, we talked about trust earlier. So because of the lack of trust that we have in the society, and we can argue about why that is, I find it very difficult to see how with the same tools we are going to get to the same level of productivity as whatever Germany or whatever country we look. When you start looking around, you see this everywhere. And I think why is governance important? Why do we talk about governance? Because governance helps to create trust. If we do not have trust, what's the alternative for trust? It is fear and power. So as long as we seem to think that we can run the country based on fear and power and not on trust, we will never get there. And this is one of the themes that we need to discuss in our society. Because people, if they want to be productive and they're trustworthy, they're going to another country, and there they will make double the amount of deliveries and will have a higher salary.
I remember making a similar comment 2 years ago on this stage when I was referring to the tax office and HMRC in London. HMRC in London, in the UK, would basically make you pay a fine once you do something wrong, right? Whereas in Poland or in other countries in Eastern Europe or Central and Eastern Europe, they would make sure that they are checking everything so you wouldn't make a mistake. So that is this trust issue.
Maybe just to come a little bit back to earth, of course we need trust, and I agree that we definitely need a vision which needs to be perpetrated among one government after the other, but we need also money to, the money are, I think, key to one of the key elements to achieve this economic growth that we are aiming. A little bit to answer a little bit to a question coming from the lady in the public, I think indeed there are economists saying that a certain crisis is somewhere at the horizon. There are debates on whether this crisis is closer or farther. But if we look at how if we think at how this crisis would impact our region, I think we also have to look back a little bit at what happened 10 years ago. How did a significant economic and financial crisis impacted this CE region? If we think at Romania, because we lived it, at least some of us lived it here, we in Romania didn't really have a financial crisis. We had an economic crisis because of significant economic and macroeconomic imbalances. But again, if we look at from a long-term perspective, where have we been? Where has Romania been before the crisis? Where is now? We see that along these economic cycles, there is accumulation of wealth, and I think gradually we are achieving the potential in various sectors. And money, indeed, our inflows coming into the country are one of the key items helping achieve this potential. And money are coming either as FDI. Unfortunately, the FDI in the last years has been decreasing if we compare it with the period before the crisis, and we have to wonder to improve the incentives to the investors. Money are also flowing into the country from a significant part of the population which has migrated outside the country. The remittances are at very high levels. And money are also, let's say, produced or generated within our country. The problem is that the fiscal policies and the authorities are not that good at administrating this money and actually putting this money at work in order to contribute to further growth.
Let me just try and link these things. So first of all, the money. One of the things, and linking it back to Poland again, one of the factors that was part of Poland's success was the enormous absorption of EU funds. Yeah?
Yes.
And even going forward, I think Poland there again has made a bid for like 70 billion euros for the next framework. If I look at the numbers for Romania and the absorption levels, they are very, very low. So there's money that's lying on the table that Romania is basically not using. Second of all, one of the reasons why Poland could invest so much, it was not just EU funds. But after the transition, Poles started paying taxes. They had voted their governments at the national, at the local level in office. These were legitimate governments, they felt. They were delivering services. So Poles, unlike other regions outside the EU that also went through the transition, they pay taxes. And that comes back to this local government issue also again. Like, is my government delivering services for me? If it is, I will trust it. I will pay my taxes. We've just finished or are finishing a report on resilience in the Eurozone. And this trust in institutions shows up as a statistical factor everywhere. And with that, a lot of people mean it's not just that you pass a law in Parliament, but are you implementing it?
Yes.
And too many newer members in the EU, they pass laws and regulations like there's no tomorrow, and then they say, oh, now we have a challenge. Now we have to implement. But what stronger critique of the rule of law can there be if you pass a law and you don't implement it? Mm-hmm. And that undermines trust. So these are the things, the simple things, but very crucial things that generate trust. And once trust in institutions is there, it works better and better and better. Yeah? So now you have to have less and less checks, and because people just have trust in the system, in the institution.
Now it has become, or is becoming more challenging, especially for entrepreneurs in Poland to, with all the audits and tax audits.
But I just wanted to say it as
Sure.
an economist, because usually when people mention trust, they say, oh, that's historical culture. But no, these levels change over time. And it changes with how government operates, how well it operates, and how well the stakeholders, labor, business, how well they dialogue with each other. Do they sit around the table, analyze macro problems together? Do they trust each other in finding solutions?
Clara,
I completely support what has been said, and in answer to your question, I would just invite you to check the color scheme of the Regional Competitiveness Index versus the color scheme of the Regional Quality of Governance Index. And you will see that they are basically the same. There's a great study done by colleagues from the Gothenburg Institute that shows the quality of governance at regional level has a direct effect on the density and plurality of local businesses. So there's a clear, talking about competitiveness, there's a clear link there, and I think there's room for improvement in Central and Eastern Europe. Also on the MFF, I think there is plenty of money on the table, as has been said, in the future financial framework as well, especially for countries like Romania that still have regions that are less developed and not, for example, Czech Republic has no longer any region that's less developed. So there's more money for countries like Romania and Bulgaria. So these are cushions, if you want, that can soften the blow of the overall crisis that might show up. So I'm not as pessimistic with regards to, at least to the prospects of Romania in the future financial framework.
Do we have any other questions from the floor?
Here.
Oh.
My name is Ionescu. I'm head of the Defense Policy Institute here in Bucharest. Thank you so much for, I've heard a lot of very interesting things. I am not an economist, of course. I have heard about aligning agricultural dominated countries with the poverty, about the importance of governance, cycling, how to say, sinusoid here in Eastern Europe, tiger, how to say, tiger country like Poland, in my opinion, is moving towards a state capitalism, Poland, and things like that. Okay, that means that we know now, after 30 years, which are the lessons learned from, and the way ahead, in a way, to think about it. So my question is, if you are considering that if the West would have known this kind of lessons 30 years ago, or 25 years ago, or 20 years ago, they would have approached in another way this way of bringing to the standard of Western Europe the countries in Eastern Europe. That's my question.
So it's basically, if as I understand it, if
you had known in advance that kind of lessons, like we are discussing today.
Yes, what would
your approach would have been
done differently?
Differently.
The wisdom of the later age, right?
Yes.
I personally would just mention the quality of the social contract. I think that's an issue in Central and Eastern Europe, and it can be linked to paying your taxes, it can be linked to the courage of starting a business, it can be linked to a series of factors that can affect positively economic growth. And I think that the social contract was not accurately respected in Central and Eastern Europe in the last 30 years. And I think it's a huge factor of development in the years to come. It links to trust and quality of governance. Maybe I personally, as an economist, I don't think it's an issue of culture as much as it is an issue of incentives. And the HMRC, the fiscal system in the UK, has digitalized everything. So it's not necessarily a domestic factor. You can import a modus operandi and digitalize things, and then everybody will be better in that field for it. So that would be my answer to you.
Gentlemen, anything that should have been done differently, knowing the result that we have right now?
I've never succeeded in learning from my lessons, my own lessons. So I think in general it's very difficult to look at the past because when we talk about the past, we immediately talk about, well, why did this happen, who's to blame, etc., etc. I think we should learn from the past, but we should apply it for the future. And some things are not that difficult, and we can have a long discussion about why it is the case, but predictability or governance or whatever name we give it to it I think is extremely important. I mean, for the last 15 years, I'm a foreigner. Yes? I work for a bank that is foreign owned. So I've never told anybody that what they should be doing, they should lower taxes, higher taxes, whatever. But I've always said, create a predictable environment. And that is so, let's not focus on what you need to do, but how to do it. Create a predictable environment. What does that mean? Have a strategy, a declared strategy. Whenever you make legislation, make it within the framework of that strategy. So whenever you make legislation, make sure that you debate it and you consult with all the stakeholders. After you've consulted all the stakeholders, make sure that the text is clear. After the text, make sure the text is clear, give a reasonable period for implementation, which is something else than 3 days. And once, if somehow there is something unclear in the law, make sure that there's an authority that can give you a ruling that how it is going to be applied. And if you get into a conflict, make sure there's a reasonable time frame in which you can get a court decision. I mean, that's not rocket science, yes? But so I've never said, well, you should do this or this, but I always say, focus on the predictability at the end, and a lot of other stuff happens. I mean, we see exactly what you say. We see laws with no intention to implement them. Or we see all sorts of decisions without any analysis. Well, if we keep going like this, we will not achieve our potential.
Roger, you wanted to say something.
I was just thinking about my own career and how, I got my PhD in 1990, and I was very much part of sort of the neoclassical, American-trained economist school. And then I joined the World Bank, and over time, and looking back now, I really believe in this idea that behind good economics is good politics, and that's really what, if I look back, had we paid, all of us, more attention to the politics behind economics, maybe we would have done even better, no? And with that, what you said, communicate what it is you intend to do, establish a dialogue between the stakeholders. I mean, try and look at things together. Don't reduce development into a technical problem. That, if you just change this in your spreadsheet, then you'll have the right policy. No, it's not like that. It is the politics. And I think in the last years, whether that is in the country where I worked before the EU, in the Philippines, or in Poland, or in the US, we have seen political changes that nobody saw coming. Because I can tell you, if you had told me 2-3 years ago that Duterte would be president in the Philippines, that there would be Brexit, that we had Trump as I would have said, that cannot be. So these things, I think this is where, looking back, what we all should reflect a lot more in the politics of the economics.
So there's no time to look back. We should look forward, definitely. And if this was up to you now, to come up with one economic policy that would help emerging Europe grow further and faster, what would that be?
So I would say nurture trust in institutions, and push them. Make sure that this dialogue is there.
So
then
even
the economics will sort of follow.
Even though we have this 30-year experience, we still have to do the basics.
Yes.
I personally think leapfrogging, which is something the area has to do with innovation and human capital. And so what I would encourage is to support, either through funding or through policy measures, innovation hubs and education. I am subjective as a university teacher, obviously. I would support education in the area.
I would support entrepreneurship, but I think it's to a certain extent linked with education as well, and with funding. So, of course, if we speak as well, of course, if we speak of and development of entrepreneurship and increase of number of companies, of operators, which eventually as well contribute to growth of income also at individuals level, and creation of jobs, finance or access to finance through national programs or through various other incentives given to private operators is an important measure, because again we lack in Romania, we are at we are the last place in Europe if we measure the financial intermediation. 27% loans to GDP ratio, it's, I think it has not been seen in Europe for a long time.
But improving entrepreneurship means improving the business climate as well, so it's a broader area. Gentlemen?
I have a microphone, so I'll go first.
Go ahead.
I'm dumbfounded by the question, because there's definitely not one. If I was running for political office, I might come up with one thing and tell you I'll solve the problem. But there's definitely not one solution. There's a formula, and that formula is appropriate for any country at any point in time, where it is geopolitically, where it is in terms of its own maturity, what its comparative advantages are. There's a lot to it. And it gets a little bit to the question about the past. Would we do things differently? Of course we do things we know more, and we've learned things. But at the same time, it's hard to look back and, you know, it might have been, when I said that we know the technical solutions, that's for the independent technical problems that we face. There we can tell you what the solutions are. It requires governance to implement those solutions. But when you get beyond that, it gets wildly complicated really fast. And some of the pressures that there were at those times, the reasons decisions were made, where people were in their thinking, you know, this is human nature. The IMF has a great term. They always refer to people, you know, countries as muddling through. You know, this country's muddling through. The reality is that we muddle through. We make mistakes, things go this direction, they go that direction, we learn, we go through cycles, and hopefully things move in the right direction. And again, I think it really comes back to the politics. It comes back to, can you have a governance in place that can deal with all that and move things incrementally in the right direction?
Stephen.
I mean, it's a bit like asking what's the one thing I need to do to become Olympic champion. It doesn't work like that. Yes, I'm sorry. But maybe, I think when we want to have higher incomes or basically a better life or whatever, I think, I mean, that we have to realize that it is not something we can achieve directly. It's just the same as what you cannot achieve happiness by saying, well, today I'm going to be happy. It doesn't work. It's like profit in a company. If you all the day you say profit, 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 you find one day, you find out you're a very bad company and you might fall over. So profit, happiness, higher salaries, economic, all that stuff can only be achieved indirectly. And indirectly is by ambition, by good governance, and if we don't want to recognize this, and we just think that by the stroke of a pen, you increase some salaries and then you have solved the problem, I'm sorry, then, you know, we are doing things totally wrong, and we will end up in deep trouble.
But we started by saying that Emerging Europe at 30 was quite successful. Let's hope that at 60 it will be even more successful, and maybe we will have a chance to talk about it as well and see how much has been done over the next 30 years. Thank you very much for joining the panel today. I hope you enjoyed it and have drawn some conclusions, interesting conclusions from the discussion. And I'm hoping to come back to Bucharest next year to continue the discussions at the Bucharest Forum. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Andrew, for a wonderful moderation of the last panel of the day. I do want to remind you that tomorrow is going to be at least equally interesting. We are going to talk about Middle East, we are going to talk about energy, we'll have a conversation with Nicu Popescu, the Foreign Minister of Moldova, so do please come back.
Thank you.
Tomorrow, and I do have one household announcement. The speakers are being waited downstairs by a van which will take them to the hotel, and then later on to the dinner. Thank you, everybody. See you tomorrow.
Thanks, Dan.